the players were winning. Not by a small margin, either. Once Shaggy and 14's groups managed to disable more giant bots, they activated more factories. Once word was sent down to the players, all hell broke loose. Player-controlled robots fought against cog robots on the ground while the players battled for control of the larger robots. Once the first factory was claimed and 14's robot was in working order, they set about conquering the other capture points. They quickly learned that only a few robots could be activated at a factory. Once the limit was reached, they would move on to the next. The boys and Wings were a little cagey at first. But being surrounded by giant robots, there was little they could do. Once they realized what was going on, though, the guilds quickly rushed to acquire their own giant robots. It was a mad dash all around, but eventually giant robots were stomping all around Cog City, tearing through the few remaining bots. Shaggy watched it all through their robot's giant view screen. A growing sense of dread forming in the pit of his stomach. He had a sinking feeling that Cog had made a run for it. That or he was preparing something especially nasty. Of course, the random shouting over the giant robot's shared intercom wasn't helping things. Anika, you can't take that section. It belongs to the Silver Wings. Anyone know what this writing shit is on the walls? Magic mumbo jumbo. Just wipe it off and move on. Other people need to get their upgrades. So is the raid over? Lame. There wasn't even a boss in this shitty event. Shaggy rubbed his eyes and tried to collect his own thoughts. The players were going to turn on each other here soon. Ren directed their giant robot to scan the horizon, and the large city full of factories and robots was cast before them. Off in the distance, Shaggy could see the Mad Witch's magical protection. Still lit up and waiting. But for what, he didn't know. It's not over, right? Dave asked. Shaggy shook his head. No way in hell. Even if Cog ran, he'd have a few surprises in store for us somewhere. Well, he better activate them soon. The guilds are already carving up the city into their own little territories. We don't want to be here when this shit actually hits the fan. Even with a giant bot, I think we'd be overrun by bots. Big and small. Slink said as he idly tapped away at the terminal. Levy shrugged her shoulders next to him. No telling. If he left a surprise, maybe it won't activate until we try to leave. But if he is still here, then he has a bunch of time to prepare something nasty. Hey, Ren. Vlad called. Try moving us toward the city limits. Maybe that'll proc some kind of end-of-raid boss battle. Like, can't we just talk to them? All of them turned to regard the terminal. The squawking voices of the other players were still reverberating through their robot's head. It was like a cascade of idiocy washing down into their ears. Everyone was shouting, and no one was listening. Shaggy was sure he heard the same swears and complaints being repeated multiple times. Shaggy gave Dave a pitying look, and the gregarious man's smile faltered a little. There was no sense diving into that pool of shouting maniacs. What about your god? Levy asked. My god? Shaggy squinted his eyes in thought before he guessed what she meant. Oh no way, I'm not letting that jackass ride shotgun again. Levy sighed through her nose. You don't know that's going to happen. Just invoke his name. See what happens. Slink, Vlad, and Dave were looking at him eagerly. But Shaggy snorted. He's a god. Can't he just see what's going on? If he wanted to do something, he would have already. Not if he can't find us. Cog is still probably hiding this place from him, right? So just call him up. Slink said excitedly. Yeah, Shags. Even if you go full-on God Demon Wolf, all it will mean is that you're more useful than usual. He ain't wrong, dude. Beside, I want to see what a god werewolf looks like. Shaggy sighed and checked his pockets. He still had plenty of food. Probably more than enough to survive another possession from the blood god. With gritted teeth, Shaggy moved to the center of the room and blew out a breath. Is he doing it? Ren shouted from his place, ensconced in the wall and unable to see. Shoo! Ren! He's gonna do it! Vlad hissed. Shaggy rolled his shoulders and shook out his arms. He had been sitting for a while in the giant metal robot. Not the most comfortable of places. He racked his brain for a prayer or summoning call to get the blood god to zero in on him. But he didn't know the right pomp or ritual to do it justice. So instead, he went with his old standby. Brazen idiocy. Hey! Zang! What the hell? Cog's getting away. Shaggy could hear Levy groaning loudly before his entire world went red. Judging by the way the others started looking around, they were also seeing it. Which was small comfort for Shaggy as the robot began to shake. He didn't feel any invasions in his body, which he took as a plus. But the shaking was getting worse. The player voices of the intercom were going nuts, which was another clue that the blood god was doing something. Guys? Ren called. Some shit's going on with the realm. Shaggy spun to look at the vid screen and took in Cog's magical realm. The dark sky was bleeding. It wasn't raining, but instead, red streaks of blood were pushing through the sky and dripping down the edges of the domed dimension. Shaggy though it looked like they were in a cracked snow globe, but instead of leaking, they were taking on blood. It pushed in form all around them as the desolate ground shook and writhed violently. More voices were screaming over the robot's intercom. But Shaggy ignored them as a deep baritone echoed through his mind. Took you long enough, dumbass. Hey! We were busy. Shaggy snapped on instinct. Zang snorted through his mind and Shaggy had to catch himself as he felt his brain vibrate. You should have called me as soon as you stepped within the betrayer's realm. Yeah, well, shit happened. Is he talking to you? Levy asked, sounding excited. Shaggy nodded as he felt Zang's presence leave his brain. The god was clearly off to find Cog and Shaggy was happy to be rid of him. However, his happiness was short-lived. Zang was instantly back, with his oppressive presence pushing down on Shaggy's mind. Shaggy grit his teeth and endured as his own memories flipped past his eyes. The gods seemed to take everything in, from their entry into Cog's realm, to them stealing the giant robot. He felt the blood god sneer as he scanned over Cog's magical scribblings on the inside of the robots. Zang snorted again, and Shaggy could feel the god's anger. Zang quickly finished perusing Shaggy's memories and pulled back a little. Fool. He still intends to meddle with things he best not. Yeah, he's an asshole. So where is he? The coward hides. But he will present himself, gather your allies, and prepare. Shaggy growled, as that was what they had been doing. Damn useless, God even knew that. Can't you do something? We don't exactly want to wait for. Shaggy was cut off as their robot shook again. He sighed and turned a mental eye to Zang. We get it. You're a big scary god. Knock off the earth shaking. It's not me, dumbass. Our prey is presenting himself, Zang said excitedly before pulling his presence away again. Shaggy could still feel the blood god. His existence was everywhere now. Especially with the blood still seeping into Cog's realm. He turned back to the screen and watched. The players had all turned to watch the sky drip blood. The controlled robots on the ground even stopped, as they were no longer given commands. A general hush seemed to fall over everything. The only sound was the ground shaking and the sound of a few buildings being shaken to the ground. Then, with a sudden and almost alarming ferocity, the whole of Cog's city exploded upward. Tiny robots went flying everywhere and a few of the giant robots were shoved roughly away. A huge mound of dirt was pushing up from the middle of the city. Players were hooting and hollering over the intercom as the city itself was reshaped. A giant black pyramid was taking shape right in front of them. Ren had their robot back off as the giant pyramid pushed buildings and players back from all angles. Whoa! Is it the endgame? Hey! The robots are acting funny. Those magic scribbles are doing stuff. Slink rushed to take in all the new data at the terminal. But Cog wasn't done. At the four corners of the giant pyramid, four giant insect-like spikes rose from the ground. They curled inward, their points almost meeting at the apex of the pyramid. Each spike was the same black onyx color of the pyramid. Shaggy shuddered as he realized where he had seen the pyramid before. It was the same one he had seen in Zhang's realm. The one where Cog sat upon a throne of bone and pissed off the blood god. He took a deep breath as Ren kept back their robot away. The pyramid was still crawling toward the sky. Players and robots that approached were tossed aside by purple lightning. It arced up from the base of the pyramid, collecting at the top and shooting down one of the four spikes. Even the giant robots weren't immune to the lightning. Shaggy watched one freeze up as the purple lightning slammed into it. The giant robot went skidding to the ground as its legs and arms locked up. Ren moved their outer camera to look up at the pyramid as it started to tower over their 100-foot robot. Players, robots, and giant robots were tossed off the pyramid as it continued to grow. Shaggy could barely make out a purple orb of energy glowing brightly at the top of the pyramid. He sighed as he listened to the players still ranting and raving about one thing or another. That's when he heard something worrying from the radio. Our robot is moving on its own," one voice shouted. "The human-sized robots are swarming player bots again." Another added. "The robots are revolting. Our big bot's suffocating us." "What do you mean the self-destruct dash?" They all watched as a giant robot imploded from the inside, sending bits of shrapnel flying all over. The pyramid emerged unscathed from the blast, and Shaggy could feel Zhang's annoyance. The blood god was now just a presence in the realm. Not quite in Shaggy's head, but he'd bet the damn god would have answers. "What's he doing?" Shaggy asked. Zhang's voice came back slowly. Barely contained rage hidden within the words. Shaggy could guess that the god was being careful not to turn his brain into jelly. "The fool seeks to sap and harness my power. He intends to trap me within those shells of metal and seal me away." "He can do that?" Shaggy asked, shocking Levy and the others. They were all giving him concerned looks, even as the players were fighting on the pyramid outside. Shaggy ignored them as he awaited an answer. "No. He is a fly, trying to trap a spider. But his machinations will turn his creations back on your army. You must get to the old bastard and slay him." Shaggy grit his teeth. "That's the plan. Do not forget my crown, champion. The Mad Witch is sure to try some trickery. Do not let her have it." Shaggy grimaced and nodded while waving the blood god away from his mind. When he focused back on his friends, he found that most were looking at him. Vlad seemed annoyed, Levy was worried, Dave was excited, and Slink was working. Shaggy shook his head and sighed as he pointed at the vid screen. "We got to charge up the pyramid and get to Cog. All while avoiding the lightning and newly hostile robots." Shaggy huffed. Vlad nodded and turned to Mist, an evil smile on his face. "I got the cannon." Dave sucked in a breath, a look of hurt on his face as he watched Vlad go. "Aw man. Guess that means I'm stuck watching things go down, then?" Ren grunted. "Not really. We got borders. Humanoid bots have climbed our legs and are punching their way in. They seem way stronger than before. We have reports of them glowing purple and exploding once defeated." Slink added. "We just lost another giant bot." The pale teen's words were punctuated by a flash of purple filling their view. Apparently, the big ones could go critical too. Shaggy groaned as he grew his claws and got ready to leave. But Levy put a hand on his shoulder. "You need to be up here to handle Cog. Dave can handle the borders." Dave chuckled. "Hee hee. Exploding robots in tight spaces? Hell yeah." Dave became a blue blur and rushed off. Shaggy could hear Slink relaying what they knew to the other robot pilots, and he glanced at his wife. Levy grinned at him as she summoned her staff. What Zhang had said echoed through his brain and he asked, "Do you think Corgan will try something?" Levy paused in thought. Soon, though, she nodded glumly. Yeah, if she thinks she can get away with it. She'll try to renege on the deal with Zhang. We're going to have to deal with that, too. Great, Shaggy groaned. The pillars. Slink said after listening to the radio some more. Ren, go for the spike pillars. They are redirecting the lighting back up the pyramid. We have reports they can be damaged. Their robot trudged over Tati closest pillar. Fighting was going on all over the pyramid. Shaggy could see players and robots duking it out everywhere. Nothing could really challenge the giant bots. But Cog had apparently regained control of a few of those as well. Everywhere burst of purple explosions dotted the screen. Shaggy bit the inside of his cheek in annoyance and tried to be patient. Next to him, Levy was doing something with the magical runes she had drawn on the inside of their bot. Ren grunted. This damn pillars are tough as hell. Shaggy watched as Ren threw haymaker after haymaker into the large black spike. Every now and again, a burst of purple lightning would flash and Ren would move their bot out of the way. Thankfully, Slink had coordinated enough players that most knew what the goal was. The players on the ground also seemed to pick up on things. They threw whatever powers or magic they could, but still the pillar held firm. Their own robot would shake from the inside. Dave was clearly having a blast tearing up robots within the giant robot's narrow hulls. Slink mentioned that repairs were still ongoing, but the robots were doing too much damage too fast. If they didn't hurry with the pillar, they were going to lose the giant robot. The climb up the gigantic pyramid was going to be a hell of a slog without the robot. Huh! Ren shouted, snapping everyone's eyes to the screen again. A large crack had appeared in the pillar. Judging by the widening green glow from within, they were making headway. It wasn't long before the pillar finally cracked and fell. Its long curved body slamming into the pyramid. Shaggy didn't want to waste any time and quickly shouted. Go! Up the pyramid, Ren. We need to get close before we lose control of the robot. Yeah. I hear ya. Ren snarked as he turned their robot and rushed up the side of the pyramid. Players and other robots followed. Shaggy watched as their robot kicked swarms of tiny robots as it raced up the pyramid. Ren was using the robots' legs and arms to push and climb their way up. Nearby, other robots moved to intercept them, but Vlad kept them at bay pretty easily. Slink's terminal was going nuts with shouts of celebrating and complaints coming from the players. Apparently, the one pillar only knocked out their side of the pyramid. There were some arguments about killing each pillar before rushing the boss, but they ignored it. Shaggy shifted his hands into claws and then back to regular hands nervously. This was it. At the top of the pyramid was the raid boss, Cog. Waiting in his new younger body. Shaggy tried to center in on what he knew about the older man. Cog controlled robots with his mind and was a half-assed mage at best. He had his cybernetic limbs, but Shaggy didn't think those would be too much trouble. Shaggy lost his train of thought as their robot was shoved sideways roughly. Levy tried to stop his trip and wound up falling to the floor. Shaggy steadied himself as Ren swore. He helped Levy back up as a smug voice yelled over the radio, eclipsing all the other squabbling players. Arrogant ass. Whoever gets there first, Nimrod. The rest of the radio chatter was full of players snarking or outright swearing at the leader of the Silver Wings. Shaggy didn't disagree, but another jarring knock made him look at the vid screen. Another giant robot was slamming into them and trying to knock them off the pyramid. It didn't take a genius to realize that the Wings were making an end-of-raid play. But they weren't having it. Ren pushed back, but the two bots were neck and neck as they ran up the steep incline. A short while after a harsh hit, Vlad appeared next to Shaggy in a puff of black smoke. Shaggy raised an eyebrow and the irate vampire swore. We're also losing too much of our legs. Fuel efficiency is down. I think Dave is still down there, though. We keep taking damage from explosions. We can't keep this up. Vlad. Shaggy said. The vampire nodded and turned to Mist again. On it! Vlad rushed off to help Dave as they continued their race. Ren was still doing his best to trip up the Wings robot. But just by looking at the other bot, Shaggy could tell they were going to run out of steam first. However, a lucky elbow from Ren shoved the Wings robot just over the edge of the pyramid and into the path of the purple lightning. Shaggy almost cheered when the opposing bot froze up, but the sight at the top of the pyramid stopped him. The top of the pyramid was a large, flat square. 3 claw-like pillars hung over the square top, collecting and sending lightning back down the pyramid. At the center of the flat square was a purple ball, reaching outward toward the sides of the pyramid. Shaggy thought it looked like a mage's shield spell, and he clenched his hands. That was going to be a pain to get through. But before they managed to get to the top of the pyramid, a loud explosion rocked them again. Levy and Shaggy were thrown to the ground, and Slink swore as he slammed into the terminal with his hip. Vlad and Dave appeared suddenly. Vlad struggling to carrying a panting Dave. His blue armor was cracked and blackened in places. Shaggy could see part of Dave's face from cracks in the mask. Levy hurried to get a healing potion into Dave as Vlad looked around. The vid screen flickered, showing the purple dome Shaggy was sure housed Cog. Ren's housing popped open and the large Rhino Man quickly got out and collected his hammer. "It's a race for glory," Shaggy said as he hurried toward the hole in the robot's chin. "Dude, we can't make it." "Not before the others do," Vlad said, pointing at the flickering screen. Shaggy nodded. He agreed, but what else were they going to do? He was just surprised no speedster had made it up the pyramid yet. Shaggy looked between Dave and Vlad and smiled. "Why don't the two of you rush up there, then? Hold a spot for us or something? Do you really see the other guilds accepting that? Besides, they aren't the ones that need to kill Cog." "You are," Levy pointed out. Shaggy grit his teeth and exited the giant robot. Sounds of fighting and snapping electricity filled his ears. He dropped to the pyramid's surface and turned to the others. They all looked at him and then at the dome protecting Cog. He grunted loudly and huffed angrily. He really didn't want to fight Cog alone. But more and more players were getting closer. They needed to move now. "Hop on," Shaggy called. Up angrily and started to shift. He didn't wait to hear what the others had to say. Instead, he just transformed into his werewolf form and looked at them all. Levy dropped off the robot and landed on his back. Followed by Slink, Dave, Vlad, and then Ren, whose added weight hurt even Shaggy's densely muscled back. Shaggy gave a howl and rushed to the top of the pyramid. He was nowhere near as fast as he could have been. But he hoped that having everyone with him when he made it to the top would mean he wouldn't have to fight alone. An orange speedster zoomed past Shaggy as he ran. Slink and Levy threw spells and energy blast at the player. But they easily dodged around everything and made it to the top first. Shaggy groaned mentally as he watched the other player touch the purple shield. With a rush of energy, a wave of purple magic exploded from the top of the pyramid and blew the speedster off the side. Shaggy thanked his good luck and put on as much speed as he could. Whatever anti-personal magic was on the Cog's protective dome was slowly reforming. But in the middle, where the dome had been protecting, sat Cog on a familiar throne of bones. A bone crown upon his head. Shaggy felt Zhang's presence at the back of his mind as he put on a last burst of speed and slid to a stop atop the pyramid. The purple barrier was slowly reforming behind him as Cog stood. Shaggy sat down and let his friends get off his back. It felt like they had all made it to the top. As he shifted back into his human form, he looked around. The 6 of them were now encased in a magical purple dome with Cog. The previously old man looked as young as ever. His black and silver cybernetic arm and legs glowed faintly with purple magic. Shaggy shook off his transformation and flexed his clawed hands. Cog sneered at them all as he popped the knuckles of his human hand. "Well, it looks like if you want to put down a dog, you have to do it yourself." Shaggy and Cog glowered as all around them purple magic whirled and players shouted. He could feel Zhang pressed up against the back of his mind. eagerly waiting for a display of brutality, and Shaggy was all too happy to give it to him. With a last look at his friends, Shaggy pounced and the final fight of the raid began. Shaggy had no illusions that his pounce was going to work. Cog was standing there, smug smile on his face. Even as Vlad and Dave disappeared and Slink pulled out his rifle. Even as Ren charged with his hammer high and Levy drew on her magic. But as Shaggy soared through the air, claws ready to slash the smug man's young face, he at least hoped he'd distract the bastard. However, it was not to be. Cog's black robot arm glowed purple and blurred through the air. His hand came back holding Vlad by the neck. The super-fast vampire was snatched from the air clean before Shaggy made it to his target. With a snort of derision, Cog blurred his arm again and Shaggy was smacked out of the air by a flying Vlad. The force of the blow cracked Shaggy's sternum and punched the air from his lungs. But Vlad seemed to come away the worse as the vampire player was screaming in agony. They rocketed across the pyramid roof. Shaggy's body, creating a divot in the ground as his body slid. Once they stopped, Shaggy tossed a groaning Vlad off of him and waited for his healing to finish. Most of the damage was healed in flight, but the heaviest stuff was going to take a few seconds. As he waited, he watched Dave try to slam a kick into Cog's bald head. A purple shield rose up and Dave's leg recoiled, purple sparks flying. The same happened when Ren slammed his sledgehammer into Cog's chest. "Shield!" Shaggy shouted. "I see it." Levy responded, hands drawing purple runes in the air. Her magic formed in the air before it dove toward Cog and attached to his layer of protection. The angry technopath sneered and tried to swipe away Levy's magic. But his cybernetic and real hand passed through her purple tendrils harmlessly. "Well, that's annoying." Cog sneered as he raised a leg. Shaggy got to his feet as Vlad was still collecting himself. He watched as Cog's leg broke at the ankle and a green energy ball formed at the joint. Cog gripped his own thigh and aimed his leg like a cannon at Levy. Shaggy moved, but Cog got his shot off. A green sparking orb of energy tore across the rooftop. Ren and Dave were scooped up in the backblast as the moved. Shaggy put himself in the path of the orb and braced himself. But a blue blast hit the green orb from the side and it exploded in a shower of sparks. Shaggy lowered his arms and looked at a smug-looking Slink. The teen gave Shaggy a jaunty salute before he swung his rifle back to Cog. The raid boss's narrow face was absolutely livid as his foot reattached itself to his leg. He was glaring at Slink now, and Shaggy didn't want to know what the old bastard had planned. Shaggy threw himself forward again, charging the Cog and slashing with his claws. He felt his claws bounce off Cog's magical shield as swept past. Cog swung his metal arm in a wide arc in response. But Shaggy ducked and came up with his claws. Cog backstepped, but Slink's energy blast caught Cog in the back, sending him face-first into Shaggy's claws. But the purple shield flared again, stopping any real damage. Both Shaggy and Cog growled in angry. Ren reached in with both arms and tried to grab the slim technopath. But Cog kicked out with a cybernetic leg and stiff-legged the Rhino Man in the stomach. The spry old man in a young man's body dodged past Ren's failed tackle and waved a hand towards Slink. Shaggy didn't have a chance to see what Cog had done, 'cause Dave and Vlad were suddenly there, both moving as fast as they could. Shaggy stood gobsmacked at the speed at which the fight was now occurring. Between Vlad and Dave, they seemed to put the old man on his back foot. Vlad would get stopped by Cog and Dave's kicks would ping off the old man's shield. Shaggy was trying to time his window when Slink shouted in pain. "Arg!" Shaggy spun and saw Slink wrestling with his own rifle. The white energy weapon had grown little prongs and was actively trying to stab Slink in the face. At the teen's waist, his two pistols had also come alive and were jabbing into him. "Shit!" Shaggy swore and ran over to help. Larry, Curly, and Mo were out when he arrived. Larry and Curly were snapping and hissing at Slink's two pistols as Mo did his best to yank the rifle off of Slink's chest and neck. Shaggy reached down and grabbed one of the pistols. It sparked and snapped at him with little needle-like arms. Light blue electricity danced along in, and Shaggy quickly tossed it away. The tiny gunbot scuttled to its spindly legs and charged Shaggy again. But Shaggy ignored it as he helped Slink pull the other guns off. The second pistol was tossed aside as well as Shaggy snapped the rifle in half. The energy weapon whirred slightly as it died. Shaggy threw it to the ground and turned to deal with the other two gunbots. But Slink snakes were tearing them apart. Shaggy spared a glance at Slink. The boy was bleeding from multiple small pinpricks in his face, but otherwise seemed fine. He was pulling a small vial from his hip and taking a sip as Shaggy looked him over. Slink gave him a sorry look. "There goes my usefulness." Shaggy just looked down at the three space snakes ripping the tiny robots apart. Slink gave him a noncommittal shrug and said nothing. "Ads!" Ren shouted. Shaggy groaned as he took in the scene again. Dave and Vlad were still trying to batter Cog to death unsuccessfully. Levy was still draining Cog's shield and Ren was fighting robots at the edge of the pyramid roof. Slink swore as Shaggy rushed to help, but Levy's voice stopped him. "Get the speedsters on the ads. Ren and Shaggy on Cog, Tank and Spank. Slink defend me." Shaggy waited for half a beat to see if anyone complained. When no one did, they all moved to fulfill their roles. Dave and Vlad pulled off of Cog, making the technopath look very confused. But that look cleared up as Shaggy pounced at him. Behind Shaggy, he could hear the rush of Ren's enormous feet charging. When he inevitably bounced off of Cog's shield, Shaggy rolled away quick. Ren was right behind him, hammer raised, and he swung it hard into Cog. The slim man danced back, but seemed otherwise unharmed. Shaggy and Ren shared a disgruntled look before they dove back in. All around, black and blue blurs fought silver robots as Ren and Shaggy tried to wear the old man out. But not only was Cog faster, his cybernetics were just as strong as Ren and Shaggy. Shaggy used his left arm to block a haymaker aimed at Ren's side and grunted. He had to continually throw himself in front of a few blows as Ren focused solely on swinging his hammer. His healing was keeping up, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. Cog roared and angry as Ren swung his hammer over Shaggy's shoulder and down Cog's head. The man's bald head snapped downward harshly and Shaggy almost cackled. Cog pulled his head up and glared at Shaggy, blood dripping from his head. Shaggy felt his eyes go wide as they had finally drawn first blood. But then Cog's eyes burned with a purple flame and Levy gave a shout of surprise. Shaggy punched forward with a claw, but Cog leapt backward and started flying through the air. His skinny body lifted above the center of the pyramid and a purple glow suffused his body. "First phase is cleared. Heal up," Ren ordered. Shaggy immediately stuffed a candy bar into his mouth. But when that didn't seem to be working fast enough, he grabbed another. He and Ren back away toward Levy and the others as they all watched and waited. A slew of silver and bronze robot parts littered the pyramid roof. But it didn't look like anything else was moving to Shaggy. Slink was wearing Mo around his neck and Larry and Curly were curled around his hands like knuckle wraps. Shaggy raised an eyebrow, but the boy said nothing as he chugged a health potion. Levy chugged a blue potion before she said, "His shield is gone and his magic is low. Next phase has to be something else." "Something mechanical? More robot dudes?" "Shit!" Shaggy shouted as a piece of metal chopped into his leg as it flew by. The others all huddled together as the broken robot parts on the roof all flew toward Cog. Between Dave and Vlad, the two had managed to crush a bunch of robots. Those pieces were now flying up at Cog, each coming together one by one. Ren and Dave were smacked with flying metal before Levy managed to get a thin shield around all of them. They all watched as a swirling mass of broken robots plastered themselves against Cog. "We can't just stand here and watch." "Then you try something, Vlad." "I'm not getting cut to bits by floating metal." Dave patted Vlad's shoulder. "We'll both go, dude. We can move the fastest, right?" Vlad gave the armored Dave a nod and they both burst from Levy's protective bubble. Blue and black streaks zoomed around as the pair tried and failed to jump at the floating cog. Shaggy took in the scene as more and more metal seemed to form a whirlwind that danced around the top of the pyramid. He didn't know what Cog was planning, but he didn't like it. "Can we push the metal outside the dome?" Slink asked. "With what?" "We'd have to grab it piece by piece," Shaggy said. "Or I could create a shockwave," Levy said excitedly before hugging Slink. "Great idea. Will that work?" Ren asked. "I think so. But I have to drop the shield and focus on a shockwave. I'll also have to be right in the center of the roof, right below Cog. So y'all will have to protect me." "Great." Shaggy grunted as he gave Ren a nod. He saw Slink gulp as the boy's snakes found shelter within his body again. With a blink, Levy's thin shield was gone and Shaggy and Ren used their bodies to protect Slink and Levy. They slowly moved across the roof, bits of metal slashing at them with each step. Shaggy felt his skin tear away and regrow as more and more metal tore into him. He didn't want to guess how Ren was doing through the tornado of metal. In what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes, they arrived just below Cog. Dave and Vlad had stopped trying to get to the floating boss and were now batting bits of metal away. Surprisingly, the tornado calmed down the closer they got beneath Cog. Once they arrived, Ren and Shaggy quickly began eating and healing up. Levy meanwhile had her hands held together, a purple ball ready and waiting. With an almighty shout, Levy pushed the orb upward and let it expand. A rush of magic energy flew in every direction. Shaggy and the others were pushed back a few feet. But all of the rest of the flying metal went careening toward the dome surrounding the roof. Shaggy and the others grinned as the swirling tornado of metal stopped and sound came back to them all. Shaggy hadn't realized how loud it had been while the metal was spinning. He looked to Levy, who looked slightly winded, but happened as she spun around in the center of the roof, then a large metal foot fell on her. Shaggy blinked as he watched Levy's right shoulder and arm get ripped off her body. Levy screamed as her body suddenly became cubes of white light. Shaggy bit back cry as he mentally reminded himself it was game. He had lost Levy before in a game and vice versa. Nothing to lose his head about. It was a raid boss, this shit happened. Now that the whore is out of the way, I think we gentlemen can have a fine upstanding battle as men, a heavily synthesized voice said. Shaggy looked up from where Levy disappeared and glared at a 12-foot-tall giant armor. Cog had completed his work and was now cocooned inside a giant, bulky-looking metal robot. What Cog had said penetrated Shaggy's brain, and he felt his anger rise again. But he tamped it down. Cog was just trying to get him angry and stupid. There was no sense giving him what he wants. Shaggy started walking toward Cog's giant robot. Shaggy heard his friends join him, but he didn't look at them as he gazed up at his target. A unique sense of purpose filled him. It wasn't any kind of typical emotion. It was more like fact. Like a simple, pure, and absolute fact. Cog was going to die. He was going to rip the amalgamation of data and subroutines into tiny little pieces and then send it to Zane to be tortured for eons. 1 eon in game was worth 3 out of game. So that's a lot of eons. Shaggy thought, idly. So deep was Shaggy in his thoughts that he missed his legs growing. So crystal clear was his intent that he missed his arms bulging and growing hairier. He even missed the worried questions coming from his friends and even their cheers as he finally arrived before Cog. Shaggy hadn't even realized that he was staring directly at the heavily armored islet where he was sure Cog was hiding. However, the one thing he didn't not miss was how deep and gravely his voice was as he threatened the old technopath. I'm going to rip you out of there and send you straight to hell," Shaggy's new gravely voice said. Not waiting for a reply, Shaggy listened to his instincts and opened his mouth and snapped his jaws shut around the silver and bronze alloy that made Cog's armor. He felt the metal squeal under his jaws, and Shaggy pushed the giant robot's body with his large, lengthy arms. Shaggy wrenched his neck muscles around as he pulled the metal away like paper and grinned. He felt the metal cut up his mouth and lips before he spat it out. A wad of blood and metal landed on the floor and Shaggy grinned. Cog was seated in the center of the robot, gobsmacked. His eyes were wide and in them Shaggy could see a beast almost as tall as Cog's robot. Its legs were bent and its mouth was bloody. Its large, hairy chest was on full display as its long, bulky arms hung down by its knees. It had the head of a wolf with its long snout slightly bloody from biting Cog's metal body. It was a beast ready and willing to kill. It was only a moment before Shaggy realized that the beast was him, and when he did, he howled. Cog's face shifted to a rictus of rage and suddenly Shaggy's arms were encased in metal. Shaggy ripped his massive arms free as Cog's metal suit closed back up. Metal plates shifted and the robot suit back off a few steps. Shaggy stomped forward but stopped when he spotted Vlad and Dave rushing in. Blurred blue lines trailed Dave as he ran and Vlad seemed to moving at a slower level of super speed. Shaggy tilted in his head in confusion as he watched the pair take Cog from either side. It wasn't until he turned to regard Ren and Slink that Shaggy realized what he was seeing. Ren was moving in slow motion as Slink had barely drawn his snakes back out. Shaggy turned back to Dave and Vlad. The pair were battering Cog's metal armor as the big robot swiped at them. If Shaggy had to guess, he was slower than Dave, but faster than Cog. If what his senses were telling him were true. With a gently push off the ground, Shaggy activated his pounce ability and aimed for the robot's chest. Shaggy blasted forward, the pyramid roof cracking under his feet as he was launched. He had enough time to see Dave turn toward him, alarmed. A flash of black and Vlad tackled Dave out of the way as Shaggy slammed into Cog's robot suit. Shaggy was caught so off guard that he didn't get his arms up fast enough. Instead, he headbutted the robot's metal plating and bounced back slightly. Cog, however, was blown backward and tumbled to his metal knees. Shaggy shook off the blow and looked down. His wolf legs and clawed feet clacked against the black surface of the pyramid roof. Shaggy merely grinned as Dave gave a whoop of excitement. Behind the pair of speedsters, Ren and Slink were slowing to a stop as they watched the fight. Shaggy waved them both off as he turned back to Cog's robot suit. They could get in their hits wherever they could, but he was going to rip the old man from the suit and rip him apart. Shaggy rushed in again, careful to watch his speed. Raising both of his large clawed hands, Shaggy swiped them across the robot's metal surface. He tore chunks of metal off the robot and sent bolts and metal strips flying. But just as fast, Cog would pull in more metal and rebuild his robot. Shaggy growled and pulled back for another bite with his jaws. But Cog punched him in the face. The brown blur of Cog's fist smacked Shaggy in the nose and cracked it badly. Shaggy held in pain as he backed away. Blinking tears from his eyes as his nose healed, Shaggy saw Dave and Vlad rush in again. Vlad's jittery, speedy movements looked weird to Shaggy, while Dave was practically moving at normal speeds. But the two pounced on Cog's metal body and started punching and clawing. Shaggy jumped in and stabbed both of his claws deep into the metal body of the robot. Waiting for a cry of anguish from Cog, Shaggy missed the backhand as it swiped both him and Dave. Dave's smaller armored form slammed into Shaggy's side and squished them together under Cog's fist. Shaggy acted on instinct and slashed his own claws at the arm. The pressure released and Dave collapsed to the floor before rolling away. Shaggy wanted to check on Dave, but the arm he had just cut was slowly building itself back up again. He growled and angrily started clawing at the robotic arm. Behind him, he heard Vlad's own tiny clawed finger pinging off the robot's armor. Shaggy slashed and clawed the robot's arm to pieces as Cog recoiled from the assault. They seemed to do a lot of damage. But Cog was rebuilding the robot just as fast as they were breaking it. Shaggy had his jaws wrapped around the metal shoulder joint of Cog's robot, when Ren's voice shouted over. "Everything. Make a hole." With slow, thundering steps, Ren charged forward. Shaggy saw Dave and Vlad split away from the front of the Cog suit. So he did the same, moving to stand next to the Cog bot as he continually sliced into its side. Ren took a running swing with his hammer and slammed it bodily into the robot's chest. A metal gong echoed through the area, and Shaggy could see the plate deform from the blow. But it quickly formed back it. Shaggy huffed and went back to ripping the suit's arm off again. But Ren's voice repeated. "Make a hole." Shaggy snorted. "Dude, you already took your shot." Shaggy wrenched his claws deeper into the suit's side before he slashed them upward again. Cog recoiled and tried to throw a haymaker at Shaggy. But surprisingly, Ren and Vlad caught the Cog's right arm and held on. Over his shoulder, Shaggy heard Slink's voice. "No, Shaggy. Make a hole." It took a second for Shaggy to register the teen's tone. But once he did, he quickly tore Cog's left arm off and jammed both of his claws into the thing's torso. Putting the backs of his hands together, Shaggy sliced his claws in either direction, creating a large gash at the robot's center. Shaggy could just barely see Cog in the robot again. But the gash was quickly healing back up. Cog's left arm was back again and Shaggy had to throw himself on top of it to stop it from hitting him. As he did, he spotted Slink rushing forward and throwing both his hands at Cog's chest. Larry, Curly, and Mo shot forth from Slink's arms and slammed into the robot's chest. Larry and Curly almost immediately disappeared into the inner workings of the robot. Mo was having a rougher time of it. Shaggy let go of Cog's arm and punched his claws into the metal chest again, hoping to give the orange snake some room. As his claws embedded in the metal, Cog's left arm came up again and slapped Shaggy's large hybrid wolf form away. Shaggy stumbled into Ren and Vlad, the three of them falling to the pyramid roof. Shaggy quickly scrabbled to his clawed feet, but the sound of Cog's scream made him slow him. Glancing at the large metal suit, Shaggy saw it flailing angrily and wildly as it kicked and punched at nothing. Slink was almost caught by a kick, but Dave's armored body got in front of the slim teen. Shaggy saw pieces of Dave's armor go flying as he stopped the blow. Inside the robot, Cog was screaming bloody murder. Shaggy couldn't help but smile, but Slink gave a sudden cry of his own and fell to the ground, nose bleeding. "Larry's dead. Mo's on Cog, but I can't feel Curly." Slink groaned, his head in his hands. "Will that do it? Can they poison him to death?" Vlad asked. Ren shook his head. "We don't want that, anyway. Shaggy's gotta kill the bastard." Shaggy flexed the large claws on both his hands. "Then let's drag his ass out of there." Without waiting for the others, Shaggy dove onto Cog again and started digging into the robot's metal body. His claws tore large gashes in the metal and Shaggy smiled as they were slow to heal. With renewed vigor, he battered Cog's robot suit to pieces. Shaggy idly spotted a green snake slowly leaving the robot's body, but he ignored it as he finally spotted flesh. Mo's large orange body was wrapped tightly around Cog's head and the technopath was clawing and punching at the enormous snake. With glee, Shaggy reached down and unceremoniously yanked Cog from his robot. He was about to slam the thin man to the ground. But Mo's hissing stopped him. Vlad and Ren were suddenly at Shaggy's side, pushing the metal suit away from Cog's human body. Shaggy gave Mo time to slip away. But as he did, Cog waved his black robotic arm in a weird gesture. A sinking feeling hit Shaggy, but he ignored it as he stared at his prize. Cog's face was purple and green. Pus oozed from several bite marks on his face, and Shaggy could tell that breathing was already uncomfortable for the man. "It's not the end." Cog wheezed past lips too swollen to close. Shaggy grinned down at the poisoned and was about to issue a one-liner. But the entire pyramid shook violently, interrupting him. Shaggy looked around. The purple dome surrounding the top of the pyramid was now gone. The sky was cracking into a cascade of various colors. Shouts and cries of robots and players fighting filled the air. Shaggy glanced at his friend in time to see Vlad dash over to the side of the roof. "Shit. We've got a bunch of bots incoming." "End it, Shaggy." "Wait. What about the crown thing?" Slink asked, looking even paler than usual. It's got to be in the bot, right? Dave said as he rushed over to the robot suit's remains. Shaggy glowered down at the puffy, venom-riddled face of Cog. The bastard was smiling. It was crooked and swollen, but it was indeed a smile. Shaggy was about to interrogate the prick. But a sharp pinch on his side made him look around. Cog had stabbed him in the side with a small white dagger of some kind. As Shaggy moved, the dagger was pulled out and his blood rushed out. He waited for his healing to staunch the wound. But nothing happened. Shaggy growled down at Cog as the man's swollen face swirled and his vision darkened. "What did you do?" Shaggy slurred angrily. "One last plan. One last great gamble from the world's greatest mind." Cog chuckled over swollen lips. Shaggy tried to roar, but he was getting dizzy. So instead, he did the only thing he could think of. He bit Cog's face. He had enough time to hear the crunch of Cog's skull and feel the blood rush over his wolfish jaws. Then Shaggy's world went black. "No. I've told you already, Carl. We are going with the more peaceful solution." General Johns shouted. "Damn it, Johns. Aliens are real. Don't you see what problems that creates? We need to be prepared. Who knows what kind of things they could be? Not only that, but they are obviously more advanced than us. They created a damn ark to run away from intergalactic war. What happens to us if that war follows them here?" General Johns glared across the table. "Believe me, we know that. This has been considered from all angles by people smarter than you, Coggins. Madam President believes that peace is the way forward with these new species. Now if you'll excuse me. I have more pressing meetings to attend." Carl Coggins sat back in his chair and pinched the bridge of his nose. Why could no one else see it? The danger these aliens presented? Why was he the only one to understand that the human race was under attack? This wasn't about a bunch of aliens seeking asylum. This was an invasion. They needed to see. He needed to tell everyone. They all needed to be prepared for the changes this would bring. Shaggy blinked rapidly as he came to. His vision was full of red and orange swirling colors, and he felt like he was in a dream. A dream where he was absolutely weightless. A pressure at his temple made him raise a hand to brush the offending feeling away. As he raised his arm, he saw he was human again. "Damn mutt. Just go back to sleep." A familiar voice hissed. Shaggy's eyes snapped open, and he stared into Cog's youthful face. The bastard's face was back to normal. Free from the toxins that Slink Snakes had injected him with. The old man's cybernetic fingers were roughly pressed against Shaggy's temple. He shook off the offending hand and growled as he tried to shift his hand into claws. But nothing happened. "Don't bother, you damn simpleton. We must remain pure as we pass to the next world," Cog said. Shaggy raised an eyebrow. "So we're both dead, then? Oh, look at that. It can make intelligent inferences. Yippee. Now, how about you close your eyes again and let a master work?" Before Shaggy could do anything, Cog's robot fingers were on his temple again. His vision swam and his eyes closed as Cog's face loomed over him. The school's roof collapsed and trapped dozens of children under tons of rubble. Tragic, Linda. Absolutely, Dawn. No official word has been given for what caused the explosion. But as the video shows, it appears a young boy with supernatural powers exploded. There's no other word for it, Linda. One moment the boy was being bullied and the next. Coggins grumbled as he wired the battery to Drone's main board. The TV in his sparsely lit workshop went on and on about the horrible loss of life. The vapid news anchors continued to play dumb about what happened. He knew what was happening. So did everyone else. They just didn't want to admit it. Those rotten aliens had done something to them. They had wrenched the human race right off the rightful path of evolution. Coggins had spent weeks scanning for any signs that the Earth's atmosphere had been tampered with. Radiation, light waves, sound waves, biological vector points, or anything else. He had devoted all of his time to trying to find out how the aliens had done it. But there was nothing, or at least not a trace, he could find. Not with his current equipment. But he refused to use the so-called cleared tech that the government was using. That all was probably covered in whatever the aliens were using to change natural human DNA. Carl shuddered as he thought about what was happening to his beloved human race. They were perversions now. Knocked off the righteous path set down by Mother Nature and science itself. There were even reports of people being able to control the various forms of energy in the world. One supposedly lived down the block from where he was squatting. Coggins had toyed with the idea of kidnapping the man. Maybe if he had a live sample, he'd be able to figure out what the aliens had done to them. But he dismissed the notion. He wasn't that desperate yet. Proof. Coggins said into the emptiness of his workshop. All I need is proof. Then they'll understand. Shaggy snapped his eyes open again and tried to brush off the foreign images in his head. Cog's metal fingers dug into his flesh as the technopath huffed in annoyance. You are surprisingly resistant to this process. Cog said idly. It was like he was talking about the weather. You know, I have never been one for brawling. But as it is how you operate, I probably should get used to it. Shaggy waited for the pain to fade from his jaw. But it was slow to do so. Either his healing didn't work here either, or he was tapped. Cog's fist slammed into Shaggy's defense, but Shaggy pivoted and countered. The knuckles of his left hand smacked Cog's chin, and the villain growled in both pain and annoyance. Shaggy didn't give the technopath time to respond as he followed his hook with 2 jabs from his right fist. Cog weakly parried the first jab, but Shaggy pulled it back fast and delivered another. The second jab smacked Cog in the nose, and Shaggy smiled as blood poured from the pale man's face. Cog went to say something else, but Shaggy ignored him. If Cog could still be hurt here, then he was going to wreck the bastard. Shaggy roughly shoved Cog's metal arm away and tried to backpedal to get some space. But nothing happened. His feet flailed wildly as Shaggy tried to push against something that wasn't there. He looked around and remembered that he and Cog were falling through a world of red and orange. The 2 colors blurred together as they both tumbled through the air. A heavy blow across his cheek brought Shaggy back to the fight. He felt his cheek crack and immense pain flared in his face again. Shaggy choked back a cry of pain and threw up his left arm. Cog's metal arm battered into Shaggy's defenses as Shaggy tried to respond. The villain wasn't that powerful, but a metal arm to the face would hurt anyone. Shaggy held his head back and let Cog take a wild swing. Overextending, Cog sent them both spinning through the air. Shaggy grabbed onto the other man's shirt and landed 2 solid punches into Cog's head. Each punch shook both of them and Shaggy whimpered from the pain in his cheek. Huh. Cog cackled as they spun. See. You are weak. Here in the land between, all are created equal. Yeah, say that without your metal toys, asshole. Shaggy slurred as he continued to punch any bit of Cog he could. They spun and fell further down into nothingness. Shaggy was the superior fighter, but Cog's metal arms and legs evened the fight. Especially when any blow either of them landed sent them both tumbling through the air. Shaggy held onto Cog's lapel as Cog gripped Shaggy behind the head. The 2 of them punched, bit, and kicked each other as they continued to fall. Occasionally, Cog would grip Shaggy's forehead again and a flash of memory would hit Shaggy hard. The emergence of mutants and mages, the legislation to protect the new species, the alien rights movement. Hundreds of years' worth of memories were shoving their way into Shaggy's brain and he was starting to realize that was Cog's plan. You can't have my body, Shaggy yelled, each word punctuated by a heavy punch. They were both spinning heavily now, and Cog was no longer trying to fight back. Instead, he kept trying to grab Shaggy's head and force his memories into Shaggy's brain. Oh, what are you using it for? Some petty crimes and juvenile japes. I have actual work that needs doing. The world needs my protection. They need to understand that my way is the only way for the pure human to survive. Shaggy gut punched Cog and followed it with a knee to the man's head. You're going to do that with my mutant body? A minor quibble that I will rectify once I have control of your body, Cog shouted back, hands reaching for Shaggy's face. Shaggy pulled away and grabbed both of Cog's arms. Cog's metal arm whirred dangerously, and Shaggy had to focus his attention on that one as the other grabbed his face. More images flashed through his mind. Why can't any of you understand? Coggins shouted at the assembled scientists. He was disgusted that they had allowed the chancellors of the various alien conclaves into the symposium. But he was going to say his piece. The mutant and magical threat were still looming. Indeed, Cog had begun to suspect that he, himself, was infected with whatever the aliens had done. His technology seemed to call to him whenever he was in the lab. It whispered about its own purity, how flesh faded and blood dried up. But metal was pure, and there were more efficient forms of fuel out there. Coggins willed the thoughts away as he stared at his audience. They were the supposed foremost minds of the age. Although most had stood up and were now leaving. Some were still seated though, small smiles on their faces as they filmed him. He could see the twinkles of those little alien camera phones everyone was carrying nowadays. He could hear the whispers from them, too. I am serious. If we don't do something soon, the pure human will be an endangered species. We must demand answers from these aliens. Mr. Coggins. Our people have done nothing to this world. In fact, have we not given everything of ourselves to this world? Humans are living longer and better lives every day, thanks to our technology. We were just as surprised by the introduction of both mutants and magic as. There's no such thing as magic. Coggins screamed. We all know that you have infected us with some genome or creation that our science cannot identify. What is it? What have you done to humanity? The disgusting multi-eyed alien quivered under Coggins' question. He could see that the alien was about to break. The answer was there, hidden behind the gross-looking purple flesh of the alien. All he had to do was crack it open and find the answer. But it was not to be. I think we've heard enough. Carl Coggins, while I respect the advances you have made in robotics, I think I speak for everyone when I say that the scientific community does not agree with your hypothesis about the mutant event. Also, your complete disregard for the magical community is outright worrying. It is not magic. There is no such thing as magic. Coggins screamed. All he got back were pitying looks and the whispers from the alien technology in the room. It whispered that they believed him. They knew the truth and understood. They were the only truth left. Coggins was starting to agree with the whispers. Shaggy snapped out of the memory and growled. With newfound strength, Shaggy let go of Cog's robotic arm and grabbed the human one. It took some spinning, but with a forceful pull, Shaggy got onto Cog's back and tried for a choke. Cog chuckled as he sucked in air. Ha ha. You idiot, we're both dead. What are you going to do, kill me again? Shaggy growled as he squeezed Cog's neck tighter. He didn't know if he could kill someone twice, but he was going to try. Cog's arm spun as he tried to get at Shaggy's head again. Shaggy pulled away, sending them both into a backflip. They tumbled repeatedly until something new happened. The air shifted, and a heavy metallic scent filled the air. Shaggy watched the world around them shift to red and the air grew heavy. Cog redoubled his struggling and Shaggy smiled. His face hurt, his arms hurt, and his powers were useless. But as the blood oceans and islands of flesh popped into existence around him, Shaggy couldn't help but laugh. They were in the blood god's realm now. Cog and Shaggy hit a pink fleshy island and rolled. Shaggy was surprised they weren't atomized as they slammed into the soft pink flesh of the island. The scent of blood was everywhere, and it was stiflingly hot. Shaggy rolled away from Cog and hurriedly stood. He tried again to summon his claws, but nothing happened. But unlike with the land between, where it felt like his powers were gone, here it felt like they were being suppressed. He was about to shout a question when Cog beat him to it. Zang. I offer a bargain. Your precious crown and the life of this mutt for clemency. Shaggy coughed in surprise at the offer. It was a bold and stupid move. The shaking of Zang's realm seemed to echo Shaggy's feelings. From the rivers of boiling blood, a voice echoed. Deep and ominous. It made Shaggy's teeth vibrate as Zang laughed at the old technopath. Ha 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 ha. You seek to return what you have stolen and kill my champion? You think this will make me grant you mercy? Cog tried to wipe the drying blood from his pants. But it was a useless endeavor. Shaggy watched Cog with interest as the man seemed to be annoyingly calm about everything. Giving up on cleaning himself, Cog looked out past their little island of flesh and grinned. The Accords, Zang. All gods must hear any bargain made in good faith within their lands. The Accords are forfeit when dealing with a thief. Shaggy fell to his knees as Zang's wrath shook the entire world. He felt like his brain was slamming into his skull as he stood back up. Thankfully, he noticed that Cog had fared no better. Shaggy thought he could see a bead of sweat sliding down the side of the bald man's head. Either from nervousness or the stifling heat, Shaggy couldn't say. So you will not be sticking to the Accords then? Cog smirked. As soon as the words left his mouth, all hell broke loose. Shaggy couldn't fully comprehend what was happening, though. As the ground shook, the colors inverted, a high-pitched whine echoed in his ears, and he swore he could taste sound. Shaggy almost wanted to log out and check if his immersion pod was damaged. But the feeling quickly lessened and Shaggy realized they had a lot of eyes on them. Not physical eyes, but Shaggy could almost sense that they were being watched from all angles. It was like his very soul was on display for all to see. Sacrifices will be quiet when in the presence of their betters. Cog spat. Shaggy growled and launched himself at Cog. The old man hadn't been expecting it as he didn't put up a defense. Shaggy tackled Cog at the waist and body slammed the slim man into the fleshy ground. With Cog dazed, Shaggy got into a mounted position and started raining punches down into Cog's faces. Cog tried to defend himself with his cybernetic arm, but Shaggy responded by grabbing the arm and rolling into an armbar. With Cog's arm between his legs and the back of his left knee on the man's throat, Shaggy pulled the metal arm backward with all his strength. Cog didn't shout in pain, but he did sputter in alarm. His metal arm creaked dangerously as Shaggy did his best to wrench the damn thing off. Cog sputtered angrily as Shaggy kept up the pressure. He still wasn't sure if he could kill Cog here, but he was certainly going to try. Even as the two wrestled on the flesh-colored ground, Shaggy could feel the eyes of others still on them. But he ignored them. They apparently would be doing nothing. Cog punched Shaggy's legs as the metal arm sparked and whirred dangerously. Shaggy put Cog's wrist in his armpit and gripped his hands under Cog's metal elbow. With an almighty tug and hissing hydraulics, Shaggy finally yanked the metal arm free of its sockets. Cog gave a gurgling cry of alarm. But Shaggy grabbed his prize and quickly stood, arm raised high in triumph. I invoke the Accords. Cog shouted after hacking and coughing his airway clear. I issue a bargain to Zang, I return his crown and add the soul of his champion for clemency and my swift return to the mortal plane. His bargain is void. Zang cried, his blood oceans roiling high now. This puny mortal stole my crown and now seeks to use its return for his own ends. The high-pitched screeching came back with a vengeance, and Shaggy vision blanked for a few seconds. Zang's realm rumbled and Shaggy could almost hear the voices in the distance having an argument. Everyone now and again a shiver would go down his spine as one of the in-game gods would look at him. It was not a comfortable situation. His only solace was that Cog seemed just as uncomfortable with the gods arguing about their fate. This isn't going to work, dumb shit. Your reliance on puerile pejoratives is a testament to your lack of intellect. Thankfully, I will not have to inhabit your body now. Once this has worked, I shall be free to return and you shall be locked in this realm forevermore. Cog's response was a smile that froze Shaggy's blood. He quickly tried to guess at what the old man was playing, but he didn't know enough about the gods or how the accords worked. He made a mental note to ask Levy about it when this shit was all over. A surge of wind almost knocked Cog and Shaggy over as Zhang's echoing cry of annoyance filled the world. Shaggy groaned as the unseen eyes returned to him and Cog. The accords have been invoked and they shall be followed. However, as you have struck at the gods, Coggins, your punishment, should you fail, shall be threefold. An unfamiliar voice echoed into Zhang's realm. Shaggy could feel Zhang seething at the edge of his perception. The god was clearly not happy with the decision. But Shaggy merely shrugged his shoulders and tossed Cog's arm to the ground. He put his arms up and squared off with the thin man, but Cog turned to the sky and spoke again. That is fair, O wise gods. However, as you can see, I am outmatched. The one I face is a champion of considerable skill, if failing intelligence. The contest must be made fair in accordance with the rules, correct? The unseen gods pulled back again and Shaggy could hear the low whine of their hidden conversation. But a thought hit him. Hey! We are already pretty fair here, right? I mean, I have no powers, he has no powers. You can't get fairer than that, right? Shaggy's vision swam as all the gods' attention switched to him again. A sudden headache hit him and he had vertigo for a few seconds. But then the feeling was gone, the low whine of talking gods was back. Cog was shooting him the stink eye, but Shaggy ignored it as he tried to collect himself again. The old man kept quiet, but Shaggy delighted in possibly throwing a wrench into the technopath's plans. The short extraplanar conference came to a swift end and Shaggy felt Zhang taut nerves tighten further. With a shudder, Zhang's realm dissolved into a black void, leaving him and Cog floating in the abyss. Cog looked alarmed and Shaggy couldn't blame him as a fight in zero gravity was a pain in the ass. But with a small pop, they both appeared back on top of Cog's pyramid. At least it looked like Cog's pyramid. Shaggy noted the distinct lack of his friends or the army of players and robots. The gods had apparently dropped them in a facsimile of Cog's realm. Shuddering, Shaggy felt more eyes turn on him and he was suddenly lifted into the air. He saw the same thing happening to Cog as he feebly struggled against the power holding him. But it was useless. With an icy feeling washing over him, Shaggy felt his body's aches and pains disappear. He was given new clothes and wiped free of the grim from the raid. With a spin and a blast of wind, Shaggy was dropped back to the obsidian roof of the pyramid and turned to look at Cog. The surly old man was still in his young prime, but now his cybernetics were gone. His arm and legs were both human, and he was dressed in a similar style to Shaggy. Shaggy didn't even try to hide his mirth as he laughed. Huh. Looks like we will have to face each other as pure humans, Cog? How do you like your odds now? The bald man scowled append and he looked like he wanted to rage at the gods. But a sudden oppressive voice pushed down on them both. In agreement with the ancient accords of the universe, the gods have seen fit to oversee this bargain. Carl Coggins has agreed to return the crown of bone to Zhang the blood god and offers the soul of Zhang's own champion in exchange for clemency. The champion has not refuted the bargain. Wait. I could do that? Therefore, Carl Coggins shall return the crown and attempt to seize the soul of Shaggy the champion. If Coggins cannot extract the soul or if his own soul is extracted, the bargain is forfeit and Zhang is free to punish Coggins for any transgressions. What prize does the blood god's champion request? Shaggy scratched his head as he glared up at nothing. Yeah, first off. Can I refute the bargain now? No. The time for such things was when the bargain was struck. You remained silent, therefore your tacit approval of the bargain was accepted. Name your prize. Shaggy grumbled, but said nothing as he tried to think of something. He was already dead, so he was going to respawn after all this, anyway. But once he popped back up, what would happen? What was going on with the Legion and Levy? Were the players still fighting in Cog's realm? A thought hit Shaggy. Oh. Can I get Cog's realm as my own? There was a brief pause as the gods conferred. Meanwhile, Cog glared at the sight of Shaggy's face. Soon the gods came back. No. The prize is not commensurate with the bargain. You have one more chance or your prize is forfeit. Shaggy growled, but quickly cut it off as a shiver went up his spine. Not commensurate to the bargain? Shaggy thought about Cog's bargain. The old man was bargaining for his own soul and clemency. So Cog would be pardoned for his transgressions against the gods and return to life. Shaggy couldn't stop the grin from spreading from his face as he thought of something. I wish for the same prize as Cog. Return me to life and grant me clemency for any transgressions against the gods. There was a long pause as Shaggy waited on bated breath. Eventually, an almost confused-sounding voice stated, "You have not transgressed against the gods to our knowledge." Shaggy smiled. "Not yet, but the way I'm going, I just might. So I want one get-out-of-jail-free card with the gods." Same as Cog. An unknown voice spoke up quickly. It crackled in Shaggy's ear and seemed to flicker in tone as it said, "The primal gods cannot speak for the gods of light or dark. We cannot accept a prize of all gods." "No," said another voice, firm as rock and twice as deep. "But you know the spirit with which the boy made the choice. The primals can agree amongst ourselves." "It is a cheeky choice," whispered another voice through Shaggy's ears. "I like it. Do we have an accord?" said the first voice finally, rocking the very pyramid Cog and Shaggy stood on. A general murmur of agreement went up from the gods and Shaggy blew out a breath. Cog was still glaring at Shaggy, so he threw the old man a middle finger and winked. Cog's face went red with rage as his hands clenched. A sudden snap at Shaggy's right hand drew his attention downward. He found he was holding a black dagger, suddenly. A glance up showed a similar dagger in Cog's hands. Both glowed with an eerie green light. The ceremonial blade shall ensure that the loser's soul is preserved for Zhang. Only a killing blow with the dagger shall be counted as a win. Carl Coggins and Shaggy, you may begin when ready. Shaggy gave a feral grin as he squared up to Cog. The man was taller, so he had a longer reach. But Shaggy was sure that Cog wasn't one for knife fighting. Shaggy wasn't a fan either in the real world. But at least he had some training with his claws. Choking up on the long handle of the knife, Shaggy dove in and tried to harrier Cog toward the roof's edge. But to his shock, Cog seemed to be perfectly cognizant of his reach advantage. Dancing backwards, the tall man swung his own dagger over Shaggy's thrust and at his head. Shaggy had to duck down further and sidestep to get away for Cog's clumsy swipes. Cog rushed forward, dagger swinging. Its ominous green glow leaving a trail in its wake. Shaggy pivoted around Cog and dashed in for a swipe at the man's legs. Cog moved his legs, but kept his body bent forward, presenting a nice target as Shaggy changed the direction of his dagger. Cog TR4 IED to pull his arm back and get his dagger up to block Shaggy. But he misjudged the distance and Shaggy's blade bit into Cog's arm. Arg harg. Cog tumbled backwards as he shrieked in pain. The blade's green glow was mirrored in the wound and made on Cog's arm. The light shone briefly as Cog quickly backed away. Shaggy stared as the flash of green light caught him off guard. Especially with what it was apparently doing to Cog. A flash of memory reminded Shaggy of his own green, glowing claws. His claw's blight was supposedly there to wear off the target's soul. If that same thing was on their daggers, Shaggy really didn't want to find out how badly that hurt. SSSSSSSS, you damn mutt. Cog hissed and shouted before he rushed forward. Shaggy quickly sidestepped a rough stab from Cog and ducked in again. Cog quickly kicked out at Shaggy, catching him in the jaw. Shaggy grunted and stumbled backwards. A ruffle of clothes made him look up and notice Cog rushing him again. Flat-footed, Shaggy stumbled to get his guard up, but Cog thrust his dagger forward and into Shaggy's shoulder. Shaggy felt the blade pierce his skin and Shaggy screamed as he felt something within him break. He wasn't sure what a soul being cut felt like, but he was pretty sure the game devs had nailed it. He felt the blade leave his shoulder, and the searing burning pain lessened to a degree. But Cog was pulling back for another stab. Shaggy dropped to his knees, a simple thing given the pain he was in, and swiped his own knife across Cog's middle. Cog roared in pain and Shaggy rolled away, his shoulder screaming at him. Slowly getting to his feet, Shaggy kept an ear out for Cog, but the man was still wailing in pain. Shaggy tucked his injured arm in and tried not to move it as he spotted the flash of green light from his dagger. Cog's wound was taking longer to come back from, probably because of its size. So Shaggy took the opportunity and rushed in again. Shaggy aimed an overhand stab at Cog's chest as he ran back in. But Cog saw him coming and backpedaled as he pulled an arm up to block the dagger. Shaggy's dagger bit into Cog's other arm, as Cog's dagger swiped upward and caught Shaggy in the chin. The tip of Cog's dagger sailed past Shaggy's nose as he was racked with the painful throbs of his soul being worn away. Cog himself recoiled and shivered as he cradled his injured arm. Shaggy chuckled as he felt adrenaline fill his veins. "How you liking the pure human, Carl? Is it everything you wanted it to be?" Cog gave an empty laugh. "Huh. The pure human is a fallacy, boy. I learned that years ago. Humankind was tainted far before those disgusting aliens showed up at our doorstep. Only within machines will we find salvation. Only in the pure, absolutely precision of the clockwork will we find peace. But people like you are still too blind to see the truth. More concerned with petty squabbles of flesh and money. You are all just dogs rolling in the mud." Shaggy shook his head at the pontificating ass and gave the only answer he could. "Woof." Cog glared at him, but Shaggy ignored it and threw himself forward. His face felt like it was burning from his chin wound, and jostling his arm made him want to scream. Cog rushed to meet him and the two stabbed at each other at the same time. Shaggy batted Cog's knife hand away as Cog tried to suck in his stomach. Shaggy stepped closer and shoved his shoulder into Cog, swiping his dagger across Cog's upper chest. The man screamed again and shivered, but brought his own knife back to stab at Shaggy again. Shaggy dodged the unwieldy swipe and slashed at Cog's knee as he stepped past. Cog gave another harsh scream and fell down to one knee. Shaggy spun on his heel and gripped Cog beneath his chin. Pulling Cog's head back, Shaggy got ready to swipe his dagger across Cog's throat. But Cog's knife hand came up and stabbed Shaggy in the stomach. Pain flared in his whole body, but Shaggy held on to Cog's chin. His arms shook and his vision blurred, but he did his best to rake his knife across Cog's throat. Cog twisted his own knife in Shaggy's stomach and Shaggy held in pain. They both fell to the pyramid roof and Shaggy shook as he tried to roll away. He wasn't sure how much of Cog's neck he had cut. So he wanted to be ready. But as his body was racked with pain, he heard a wheezing, sputtering cough from behind him. It took some effort, but he managed to spin around. On the ground, lying in a pool of his own blood, was Cog. The bald man was pale and sickly looking, his body spasming in pain as he bled out. Shaggy gripped his stomach as the bald man's eyes drilled into him. The hatred of the universe was contained in those eyes. Shaggy felt an ice-cold finger ripple down his spine. Then he blinked, and Cog's eyes misted over. His gurgling stopped and, with a final death rattle, Cog died. Almost immediately after Cog's body had breathed its last, Shaggy was transported back to Zhang's realm of blood. The heat and the sense assailed him as his wounds were healed and his dagger was taken. Shaggy idly noticed that the other gods were gone, and it was just Zhang and him alone. The unseen eyes of the blood god regarded Shaggy for a few quick seconds, before his deep voice shook Shaggy's brain. "You have done well." Shaggy nodded. "Yeah, sorry, it took so long. Had business to take care of, you know?" "I do not." "That's fair. Do you wish to remain my champion?" Shaggy blinked. Was that an option? Zhang seemed to hesitate for a few beats. "I have never granted the privilege to someone before. This time it was done out of mere convenience. You had witnessed what Cog had done, so you seemed the optimal choice. Though I doubted you quite a bit." Yeah, I'm a fail till I make it kind of guy. I've noticed. An awkward silence filled the air as Shaggy tried to think of something to say. Zhang's realm was oppressive at the best of times. But with the added awkwardness, Shaggy could hardly breathe. So what's going to happen to Cog? Did you get your crown back? My crown is with Cog's actual body. It shall be mine again shortly. As for the thing once known as Carl Coggins? His suffering has yet to begin. Shaggy nodded idly, figuring it was better not knowing what the blood god had planned. He clapped his hands together and nodded. Well then, I should probably mosey along then. You never answered my question. Zhang said. Shaggy scoffed. Please, you know the answer. I already get covered in a lot of blood, anyway. Might as well dedicate some of it to you. Zhang's silence was palpable before a tired-sounding god asked. You have no idea what is expected of you as a champion, do you? Shaggy waved at the air. Meh. I'll figure it out. Express elevator up, please. Shaggy swore he could hear the blood god roll his eyes as Shaggy's body was lifted into the air. His eyes filled with visions of blood and bone, followed by a kaleidoscope of orange and red colors. With a soft whump, Shaggy felt like he landed back on his feet, right where he had been standing before. Cog's lifeless body was at his feet, but his friends were quiet. In fact, Cog's entire realm was silent. Shaggy spun around and found himself face to face with Corrigan's small army. Her mages had created a dome of protection around the pyramid's top. Her demons had his friends encircled, and the Mad Witch herself was glaring down at him. Where's my crown? Corrigan said. Voice like ice. Shaggy sighed loudly and groaned as he wiped a hand down his face. Excuse me? Corrigan asked, one eyebrow raised. The tall sorcerer sneered, but Shaggy could see her eyes darting around the blackened sky. He could tell Zhang was still watching over him. He didn't know if Corrigan could feel the god as well, though. When the Mad Witch's gaze fell back on him, Shaggy shrugged and waved a hand down at Cog's body. He's all yours. I'm taking my friends and getting out of here. There are 3 guilds on the other side of your little dome and I will probably have to deal with that shit, too. Good day. Shaggy stepped past the taller woman and angled toward his friends. When the Corrigan didn't fry him in the first few steps, Shaggy took the win. That is until a big demon stomped in front of him. Shaggy growled and grew out his claws. He tried to summon his hybrid form, but his wolf wasn't having it. So instead, he just held his claws up and eyed the army of demons guarding his friends. Vlad was shaking his head at him, but Dave and Ren seemed ready to throw down. Slink was there too, but the slim teen was passed out on the ground near Ren. Shaggy and the demon glared at each other for a few seconds. When he was sure he was going to have to slash his way out, a curt order came from behind. It was a short, clipped order in a language Shaggy didn't recognize. But he wasn't punched. Instead, the demons around his friends all moved aside. Shaggy glanced over his shoulder to find Corrigan staring at his back. When he quirked an eyebrow, she asked. You met the whole Primal Council? Shaggy shrugged, unsure how many he had met exactly. Corrigan nodded as several mages stripped Cog of all belongings. Shaggy was sure the old man had been wearing the crown before he went into the giant mech. But the damn thing wasn't his problem now. For all he knew, Zhang had hidden it somewhere. Pushing past the demons, Shaggy joined his friends. What's going on? Vlad asked quietly. Shaggy grunted. Raid's over. Time to go. But we didn't win anything. Isn't there supposed to be an announcement or something? Don't know, don't care. We need to go before the other players eat us alive. Cog is dead, and I imagine this realm is going to shatter or something. Vlad looked annoyed, but agreed. Ren bent down and picked up Slink, and the 5 of them started pushing through Corrigan's army. They drew a few dirty looks, but Shaggy ignored them as he moved toward the Mad Witch's magic dome. The purple, see-through bit of magic was being overrun by players all trying to get a look at what was going on. Shaggy could see all manner of aliens shoving their faces into the damn thing. He shivered at the thought of the onslaught of questions they were going to get. "So what happened?" Dave asked. Shaggy shook his head. "Later. First, tell me what's up with Slink." "He passed out after the fight. I think he's growing a new snake or regenerating one. However, it works." Ren explained. Shaggy nodded as he scanned the pyramid's edge. Corrigan's dome covered everything, and he wasn't about to turn around and ask the woman to make them a hole. So instead, they waited by the edge and watched as a scrum of mages encircled Cog's body. "What are they looking for?" Vlad asked. "The blood god's bone crown. Cog was wearing it during the first phase of the fight. But I missed it during the second." "Dude. Was that the gross white thing in Cog Dude's chest?" Vlad and Ren shared a nod, but Shaggy looked at all of them, confused. Ren adjusted Slink on his shoulder before he explained. "When we looted Cog's body, there were some bone-white spikes in his chest. I thought his ribs had stabbed their way through in the fight. But maybe he melded with the crown somehow. It's as good a theory as anything." "What did you guys pull from Cog?" "His cybernetics, some diagrams for various robots, and a shit ton of money." "Which is bullshit." "Oh, can it, Vlad? You know this game uses a realistic loot system. You're not getting a legendary dagger from killing a wolf. Our loot is restricted to what Cog had on him at the time of death. It's still bullshit. We went through this entire damn raid and all we get is his money and some tech bits we can't even use? That's shit." "Well, at least it was fun, though, right? Stow it, hippie." A sudden commotion drew Shaggy's eyes back to the Mad Witch's mages. They were holding up a bloody prize of some kind. Shaggy could feel Zhang's presence in the air quiver as the mage holding the bloody crown moved over to their mistress. There was some back and forth, and then Corrigan turned to regard him. With a nod and a wave, she dismissed the dome surrounding the pyramid's roof and all hell broke loose. Hundreds of players surged onto the roof. Pushing and shoving, they rushed toward the center where Cog's body was. A few brave/stupid ones even tried to take a swing at Corrigan and her demons. However, once the witch atomized the first few players, the remaining ones scrambled around the pyramid's crowded roof. Even more were crowding around Shaggy and his friends. Shaggy was about to go full werewolf and carrying the guys out of there. But a large snap hiss of magic and a rush of air drew everyone's attention to Corrigan again. But she, and her army, were now gone. The crowd of players was silent for a few seconds, and Shaggy was sure a few were going to complain when a notification popped to life in front of him. Region-wide announcement. The Cog raid has been completed for the first time. The mad genius, Cog, has been defeated and sent to suffer at the feet of an angry god. But this is not the end. Cog's realm is now unstable and his robots have begun to go wild. Help contain the chaos for rewards from the local government or use the chaos to uncover some of Cog's hidden secrets. The realm is now considered a permanent raid space. Heroes and villains are free to battle over resources, experience, and Cog's robot designs. Have fun. Shaggy had to cover his ears as the surrounding players went apeshit. Those on top of the pyramid scattered off the sides in every direction. He wasn't sure who threw the first energy blast. But soon Shaggy and his friends were running and ducking as speedsters, energy blasts, and magic went flying everywhere. The players were killing each other everywhere as Shaggy and his friends bolted. Shaggy ignored the leader of the boys as they slid down. But plenty of other players took offense to the woman and her contingent of meatheads. The War Boys were a purely physical guild and almost always went with melee weapons in other games. But in MAO, a bunch of them had chosen super strong or otherwise physical impressive aliens. They were punching and slicing their way through players. Shaggy was sure the boys were going to turn their way. But a sudden flash of silver lit up the sky and the other guild in the raid was suddenly on the scene. Derek and his silver wings came swooping down. Their mass collection of different wing types created a heavy gust of wind as they flapped just above the boys. Shaggy rolled his eyes as Derek flipped his long black hair out of his face before shouting down. "Anika! This is silver wing turf now. You and your boys need to get out." Over 50 of the silver wings people were hovering over the pyramid's side. Shaggy wasn't sure how many people Anika had, but the few that were with her were enough to be concerned with. A tugging at his sleeve made Shaggy realize he had stopped to watch. Vlad mouthed the words "let's go" at him and they continued their long trek downward. Sure, going down the side of the pyramid was a lot easier than going up. But with all the fights breaking out and the silver wings and war boys tearing each other apart, it made navigating things extremely tricky. Then they reached the bottom of the pyramid and stepped out into pure pandemonium. Super-powered robots were waking up everywhere and throwing themselves into the melee. Unlike when Cog was alive, though, these robots had no direction. No common sense. They rushed around, attacking everyone and everything that got in their way, including Shaggy and crew. Dave armored up and ran defense as Ren held his hammer in a one-handed grip. "Need to get a belt or something for this," the rhino alien said idly as he kicked a robot away. "Should I wolf out?" Shaggy asked. "Why? Aren't we staying?" Vlad said, as he sliced his nails through an overeager player. Shaggy groaned and rolled his shoulders. "I don't think so. I'm pretty beat and I have to think we got a good amount of Evo points from all of this. The announcement said this place will still be here, so why don't we regroup and recuperate? Relaxation sounds pretty righteous right now, dudes." Agreed. Not to mention that Slink is out of the game. But does anyone know how to leave? Ren backhanded a silver robot before turning to all of them. Shaggy and the others shook their heads. But Shaggy wasn't worried. Instead, he asked his original question again. "So, werewolf ride?" "Please don't put it like that." "Yes, please. Are you going to be, like, okay though? Last time you were almost dogpiled, Shaggy." Shaggy shrugged. "I'll be fine, I think. Either way, it's the fastest way for all of us to travel. You and Vlad could speed things up and do some scouting, though. Why don't you do it? Just go all man-wolf again," Vlad said, misting through a robot's punch and then ripping its head off. "Can't," Shaggy said, tapping his chest. "Fido is a little tuckered out right now. Apparently, that change took a shitload out of him. But you can still go full wolf?" "Feels like it." The others all stared at him as they idly tore into robots. The odd player would occasionally try their luck. But with all the robots going haywire, most stayed away. Once they had cleared a spot, Shaggy focused inward and started to shift. He felt a pang of annoyance from his inner wolf, but he smacked it down and ignored it as he finished changing. A few players around them gave cries of alarm and Shaggy raised his great enormous head. After a quick full-body shake, Shaggy knelt down and let the others get on. Ren, Slink, and Vlad got aboard, but Dave simply waved as he streaked off as quickly as he could. Shaggy gave chase, following the blue blur of his friend through the ruined city. Everywhere Shaggy looked, buildings were stomped flat, and the dirt roads were pockmarked with large holes. Robots poured forth from the ground and the surrounding areas. Off in the distance, Shaggy could even see a few factories churning out smoke. He briefly wondered what the players were doing with the factories, but a flash of white stopped him. A winged man and woman were swooping down at them from overhead. As they got closer, Shaggy pulled to a stop. They did the same and Shaggy noticed a slim white communicator on the woman's wrist. It beeped and Shaggy wanted to growl as the woman rattled off his stats to the other player. "It's a player," she said. "And a villain too. Bounty isn't that high, but Cog was aiming for this thing during the raid, right? So it's got to be worth something." Shaggy did growl now, as he realized the two guildies were going to try to gank him. He was planning to launch himself at them when Vlad's black mist traveled up at them. With little sound, Vlad reformed into his solid body and flicked his long black nails into the woman's throat. She started choking as blood gushed out of the wound. "Hey," her partner shouted, surprised. The female guildie fell out of the sky as Shaggy felt Vlad's body solidify on his back. With a huffy chuckle, Wolf Shaggy tore back off through the city. He didn't doubt that the other member of the Wings was probably calling reinforcements. But they were surprisingly left alone as they cleared the edge of the city. Dave was waiting there, battling the odd robot that got too close. Off in the distance, Shaggy spotted a large blue portal almost at the edge of the realm. Dave pointed. "I think that's it." Shaggy rolled his eyes and nudged the armored player with his head. "Haha. I know. I am pretty smart." Dave chuckled. Shaggy groaned as they tore off across the enormous expanse of dirt. It was eerily quiet outside the city. Robots and players were all fighting like made in the city. But out on the plains, it was a virtual ghost town. A few other players were slowly making their way to the exit. But everyone left everyone else alone. At least until they got to the portal. Shaggy could see the spooky old mansion Corrigan had chosen as her portal site through the large blue portal. But the real pain in the ass were the jackasses standing near the bottom of the portal, trying to collect credits from people leaving. The portal itself towered over all of them, dozens of feet high. But the Silver Wings members were even blocking that. A few flyers were patrolling above and collecting credits. "Hey! This is a guild zone now. So if you come in, you have to pay a tithe. Also, the guild gets a portion of everything you collect. So pay up." A large man with no shirt and large muscles said. He was holding a small brown bag that he put people's credits in. But judging by the size, Shaggy didn't think many people were paying. In fact, the people around the portal were shouting expletives at the gate guards. Shaggy yawned as he moved forward, heedless of everyone's raised voices. As he approached the portal, the beefy-looking guy without a shirt got in his way. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. No one leaves without paying a tithe. I don't care if you are a shifter, shift back to human and pay." Shaggy didn't let the guy finish as he chomped onto the guy's head and shoulders. To Shaggy's surprise, the guild members didn't die straight away. In fact, he wrestled with Shaggy's jaws for a bit until Shaggy crunched down on the player squirming in his mouth. Once the guy stopped wriggling, Shaggy bit him in half and spit his body onto the ground. His action seemed to light the match on the whole situation as people trying to leave attacked the guildies everywhere. Laser blast went flying and players glassed each other as Shaggy sauntered through the portal. Once through, Shaggy let everyone get off and shifted back to human. As he did, he spat several times, getting the player's taste out of his mouth. Was the blood gross? Body lotion? Ren posited. "Nasty shit is what it was," Shaggy said. "Guys? Why would he be wearing body lotion?" Vlad asked. "You saw the way the guy was glistening. That could have been from working up a sweat killing bots and players." "Guys? Dude, this does not taste like sweat. This tastes like some weird-ass body oil or something. How do you even know the difference? They are pretty distinct tastes." "How do you know? Guys?" Dave shouted over them. Shaggy, Ren, and Vlad turned to look at Dave. The armored-up player was pointing down the hill from the portal. It had kicked them out near the spooky mansion. Down the hill were the other players and their cars. But there was also a new group at the bottom of the hill. Shaggy swore and as Ren chuckled. "How did they even know?" Shaggy asked as he watched multiple players make a run for it. "Guilds probably called it in." Ren posited. "So, like, are we running?" Shaggy chuckled as he shifted again. "Yep, then it's back to Undertown for the Legion." Shaggy's feet hit the deck of his in-game house. After the cog raid, he and Levy had spent the past 2 game days working on their little cave. Getting away from the cops on Liberty Hill was a simple thing for Shaggy and the others. With all the others players scattering everywhere, the cops had their hands full. Even with the hero guilds trying to help round up the independent and villain players. Word on the street was that the Silver Wings took an enormous blow politically for not having a proper cordon in place. Anika and her war boys were taking the same flack, but they didn't care. As for the riffraff, they had been making waves all throughout Austin. Slink and Ephemera said that Tolliver and Obsidian were seeping further into Austin's crime scene. Surprisingly, they hadn't gotten down to Undertown yet. It wasn't like they were a secret anymore. Most players in the days following the COG raid had hunted down Shaggy and the Legion. To the NPCs, Undertown seemed to remain a rarely spoken open secret. But for the players? They were posting new information about the underground city on the forums daily. Players were flooding the underground city, and there were rumors that the Big Four were going to expand the cave systems. I guess it's the Big Three now, Shaggy thought as he stretched. The Quinnica had been a complete non-issue since Rold got the Legion's anti-portal array up and running. Slink had even set up defensive teams for each pylon. So with no way for the pale vampires to come back, Shaggy, Vlad, and Slink had written them off. Ran and Dave were the lone holdouts, saying that they needed to keep a watchful eye out. Dave assumed that meant upping the training he gave the local citizenry and the Legion lackeys. The guy had been holding daily training sessions in the square outside the Viper's Denver. Ren, on the other hand, had found his little green friend, Randa. The little gremlin had been press-ganged into helping Rold shore up their defenses. It had only been a little under a week, but the pair were proving quite efficient. Slim arms wrapped around Shaggy's shoulders, and he sighed. "You thinking about the UGB offer, love?" Levy asked. "I was until you mentioned it. It has to be a setup." "I don't think so. The Legion is still growing and the Big Four have been cut to ribbons. They need to show stability somehow. By accepting the Legion, they show you are working with the city and the forces controlling the city are still in charge." Shaggy rolled his neck. "I get it. I just don't like it. A day after coming back from the COG raid, we get an offer from the UGB? It's super fishy, babe." "Yes, but it's a hell of an upgrade. The Legion will be one of the big dogs down here now. It also looks great with the new members. They just joined and their leaders are getting such a big offer? We couldn't hope for better." "You've been talking to Vlad, haven't you?" "He's not wrong. Then he can deal with all that shit. We've still got to get shit set up here. That new Power Stone thing needs installing. I need to reach out to our people topside, and we need more rooms built." Levy gave him a peck on the cheek and chuckled. "I'll get the Power Stone thing installed. You go do what you can. We have people building out the new houses, but remember me, and you get final say over who lives here. This is our little slice of the underground." Levy nodded slowly as she stepped off their porch and out into their front yard. The surrounding trees were growing nicely. But it was still extremely dark in the cave, even with the lights strung about the place. Off in the distance, lackeys and mages were hurriedly scurrying about. Some helping the plants grow, others moving building material to the projects being built. Shaggy momentarily missed Slink's war table, but he shook it off as he waved goodbye to his wife. One of her mages had found a magic stone on the magical black market yesterday. Levy spent most of her game time hunting down the seller and persuading him to part with it. Supposedly, the thing was going to power their cave like the old crystal did. Shaggy left the magical stuff to Levy and started walking toward the exit, but a hurried-looking lackey slid to a stop near him. Boss?" "What?" Shaggy stared at the panting guy in black leathers. The young guy's eyes were glancing everywhere but at Shaggy's face, and he seemed extremely agitated. Shaggy's gaming sense was going off. But the lackey's next words quickly quashed any excitement he was feeling. "Vlad says that the UGB guy is back. The entire council is being called." Shaggy frowned and chewed the inside of his cheek. After a quick rundown of the pros and cons of skipping the meeting, Shaggy nodded. "All right. I'll be there. Get back to work." I need to tell Mistress Levy. Fine. But let her finish what she is doing before you bother her, clear? The young lackey nodded and rushed off. Shaggy watched him run before he sighed loudly and turned toward the portal. A continual flow of lackeys and cargo went through the thing daily, but Shaggy and Levy had special privileges. He shoved himself to the front of the line and rushed through, ignoring the sinking feeling in his stomach. "Hey, boss. Did ya hear?" said Vic's voice from the room's door. Shaggy nodded as he let his stomach calm down from the portal. "Yeah. You on guard duty?" Vic nodded and lit a cigarette. "Yeah, needed a break, and this place is quieter than your damn arcade." "It's not even finished yet," Shaggy said defensively. "Doesn't stop the young folk from running throughout the building, banging on the machines you got set up." Shaggy quirked an eyebrow. "Young folk? Really, Vic? You're barely in your 30s. Vic tapped ash from his cigarette and glared at Shaggy. "I'm 26. So stop saying shit like young folk, you walking cliché." Vic looked ready to argue, but his eyes fluttered and then he stared hard at Shaggy. "You're stalling. You don't want to go to your meeting." Shaggy scratched the back of his head and smiled. "That shit's annoying, you know. But damn useful. Now get, boss. You're holding up the line, I'm sure." Shaggy glanced around at the other lackeys in the room, some of whom were carrying large metal boxes. With a sigh and a wave, he left the room and hurried down the hall. Everywhere he looked, lackeys were hauling, working, or fighting something. The few players that had joined them in the days since the cog raid were nothing compared to the NPC lackeys. Apparently, word traveled fast in the underworld. "Hey, boss man. Got any work for us?" XIV asked excitedly from her spot on the couch. Sensor glowered as he stared at the screen they were watching. "Damn it, XIV. This is just getting to the good part. We can play later. You need to see what happens to Sam. Why log into games if all you are going to do is sit around and watch TV shows?" Cutie asked. "Hey, either way, I'm de-stressing, right? Besides, logging into a game and just hanging with friends is also fun." Shaggy gave the big man a nod. "He ain't wrong. Besides, I got nothing planned right now. Why don't you check with Slink? Then head topside. All you have to really do in the Legion is pay your guild fees. Otherwise, the players are free to do whatever you want." XIV groaned. "Yeah, but what are you doing? You're the one that finds himself in the shit a lot, right? So let us ride your coattails a bit, huh?" "Ride as what?" Levy's voice said from behind Shaggy, and 14's face paled slightly. Shaggy felt Levy's slim arms wrap around him as she placed her chin on his shoulder. She glared at the woman sitting on the couch and smiled evilly. "Mine," Levy said. Shaggy flicked Levy's nose as gently as possible. "You heard what she said. Don't be a pain. Gotta stake my territory," Levy said in a mock grandiose tone. "There are far too many harlots and Jezebels in this damn bar. It's why I keep you locked away in our sex cave." XIV and Sensor choked and sputtered at the same time as Cutie chuckled. Shaggy rubbed his face and started walking toward the exit, dragging Levy with him. "If you want trouble, you gotta go out and find it, XIV. If you get in over your head, come back to the Legion. I'd help, but I've got some politicking to do." "Wait. What are we licking?" Levy asked as he dragged her up the stairs. Shaggy bit his lip to fight off the laugh. But he was sure Levy knew she had gotten him. He kept his eyes forward as he held onto Levy's arm and gently pulled her upstairs. The noise and footsteps coming from the bar filled his ears and Shaggy sighed as he led Levy through the throng of people and up 2 flights of stairs. They had all agreed to keep non-Legion members away from their actual conference room. Slink had a second room built upstairs, and the lackeys had finished it in time for the UGB envoy to be its first guest. Shaggy hadn't liked the guy at all. It was another the uptight, jackbooted thug in heavy armor that seemed to run everything in the underground governmental body. Quietly hoping the same guy hadn't come back, Shaggy thrust open the door on the third-floor conference room and rushed in. A set of bright blue eyes zeroed in on him as he entered, and Shaggy felt the frown form on his face. The look was mirrored by the UGB representative as Shaggy and Levy moved toward their seats. Vlad, Slink, Ren, and Dave were already seated at the table, and Vlad was pushing a plate of finger foods toward the UGB side of the table. Neither the representative nor his two guards took anything, though. Instead, they just watched as Shaggy pulled Levy's seat out before sitting himself. Once he was seated, the rep finally pulled his glare away and sneered across the table at them. So the bright-eyed jackass, Commander Clevin, said, "Have you decided to join the Big Four or not?" Shaggy bit back a smartass response and waited for Vlad or Ren to speak. They had spoken about the choice over and over since it was made. Shaggy had been almost immediately outvoted. The pros far outweighed the cons. Shaggy just didn't like the smug bastard's tone and general bearing. Even now, Clevin glared at them like they were something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "Yeah, about that." Vlad started. "We need to know what goes along with joining as well." Clevin's blonde eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Oh really? So you are not merely going to jump at the chance to be one of the biggest gangs in Undertown?" "We already are." Shaggy couldn't stop himself from growling. Levy, Vlad, and Ren shot him looks, but he ignored them. Sure, he had promised to stay quiet during this meeting. But that was entirely contingent on Clevin not being an asshole. Clevin snorted. "Sure, your numbers are raising and your little training sessions are cute. But you still can't be considered in the big leagues. Tell that to the Rax or the Quinnica." That, Ren interrupted before Clevin could snap back. "Brings up a good issue. What about our previous disagreements with members of the Big Four? We've had open and secret wars with the Rax and Quinnica. We've even had some run-ins with the Freaks." Clevin stared hard at Shaggy for a few seconds before he turned to address Ren. When he did, one of his guards kept the glare going. "Fights between members of the Four are common. So long as they are done in accordance with the rules. The Council will not intercede. Remember, the Four are here to maintain an equilibrium on Undertown. We need stability. So why don't you raise it back to the Big Five? We understand that there was another group down here before?" Slink asked. Clevin nodded. "The Faceless, yes. They were wiped out by an overzealous third party. The Brooke clan has supplanted them. Even though they have rejected our offers to join. But their current actions seem more geared to creating a safe space for their people." Dave pushed his chair up on two legs and asked his own question. "You dudes are, like, okay with that?" "Yes, we have no qualms with one of the entities in Undertown wanting to help others. In fact, we encourage it," Clevin said with a straight face. Shaggy bristled as he watched the commander's eyes glow with what he assumed was mirth. The UGB didn't care about doing good. They were just happy the brutes weren't pushing into any other rackets. With the northern section of Undertown a safe zone, that left the UGB with only 3 other competitors. Well, 2 now. "So why have you come with this offer specifically? You could have called a conclave and had the heads of the Freaks and Rax make the offer with you. As is tradition." Shaggy was sure he saw Clevin wince. But it was gone as soon as he noticed it. The smug-looking UGB thug coughed into his hand. Probably to buy time. When he had collected himself, Clevin addressed Vlad. "We thought it best, given your history with those groups, that we make the offer first and then take it to the conclave." The room almost rang with the bald-faced lie in Clevin's words. Of course, Shaggy's snort of disbelief probably didn't help. "Nay," Levy hissed, elbowing him in the side. Shaggy grunted from the hit and turned his gaze to the ceiling. All he had to do was wait through this, and then he could get back to setting up his little slice of heaven. He also wanted to look in on the arcade. Ahem, Slink cleared the moment. How can we be assured the conclave will accept your proposal? For all we know, we can take this to them and they can shut it all down. Clevin was silent for a long time at Slink's question. He studied each of their faces in turn before finally sighing and sitting forward. His steely smugness was gone and his two guards seemed to relax into their seats. Upon further inspection, Shaggy realized that the two guards were asleep. Clevin placed two gloved hands on the table and leaned forward. Because, he started. Both of the other gangs have gone silent. The room went quiet as everyone processed Commander Clevin's words. The slow breathing of his two unconscious guards, the only noise in the room. Shaggy glared between the heavily armored Clevin and his two guards, trying to parse what the man had done to them. Vlad, however, was more concerned with what the man had said. Care to explain that? Vlad said, eyeing Clevin's guards as well. Clevin sat back in his chair and exhaled a long breath. It's just like I said. The wrecks and freaks have gone radio silent with us. Any overtures into their territory are either rebuffed or they vanish. Vanish? Slink questioned. Yep. The wrecks appear to be concentrating on their interest topside. So that explains them. But the freaks are an even bigger can of worms. We have reports of new faces showing up all over their turf. Given how fractured the freaks were before, the influx of people in Undertown just made it worse. Ren finished, nodding along. I was wondering why we weren't fighting for more turf as more players came down. They must be focused on the western part of the city. How are we just hearing about this now? Shaggy wondered. Slink and Ephemera had been keeping up with their scouting reports. Mostly with the racks, but they had people digging their way into the freaks and even the UGB. But so far, Slink hadn't reported anything like this. Neither had Ephemera. Shaggy checked his mental link with his second in command. He found her off to the west, near the large arena at the center of Undertown. It was a good place to gather intel. At least that's what Effie said. She sent him back an inquisitive feeling. But Shaggy brushed it off and just sent back orders to remain alert. Clevin was staring at them all, clearly trying to read their faces. But Slink's face was a mask of calm, Vlad looked thoughtful, and Ren just looked annoyed. Shaggy was sure Levy was also maintaining a calm visage. But the news was huge. If the players were finally pushing the NPC gangs out of Undertown, things were about to get way more exciting. It seems your spies aren't all they are cracked up to be, Clevin said, simply shrugging. Slink went red-faced and Shaggy could see that the kid was about to spout off something stupid. But Ren covered for the kid by nodding good-naturedly. Perhaps. But you realize this news changes everything, right? The Council is a group united for the stability of Undertown. If two members have pulled back from that agreement, it might mean we are in a state of war. Clevin nodded slowly. Yes. Stability is a large part of the agreement. But an even bigger aspect is the agreement that if we did go to war, we'd kill each other. Mutual stability or mutually assured destruction. Got to love the classics. Vlad scowled. Indeed. But for now, the UGB hopes that by bringing your group in it will spur the others to action. The Rex seem poised to pull out of Undertown. But if they do so without a proper replacement in place, it will be anarchy. The lesser gangs will pile into the area and it will be pandemonium. Same thing with the Freaks' turf. Shaggy shrugged. So why don't we snap up the territory real quick? Before the small gangs can grab it. Y'all take the Freaks and we'll get the Rex. Clevin snorted this time and the noise made one of his guards snore roughly before settling again. Slink was the one that answered Shaggy's question. I still trained on Clevin. We don't have the people. Sure, we've grown. But we can't take and hold that territory on our own. We need to either shore up our defenses or make contact with the Racks and Freaks. There has to be something behind all this. The Racks are still making a profit down here, I don't think they'd leave that. Clevin smacked the table and this time one of his guards did wake up sputtering. but Clevin ignored them. We've tried to make contact. But our people were, none too gently, ejected from the territory. At least with the Racks, they sent a "please leave us alone" message. The freaks were just as happy to send back body parts. We need to find gangs to replace them before they leave and ruin the stability the governor has fought to maintain. Shaggy quirked an eyebrow and looked down the table at his friends. Clevin had blurted out a lot of interesting details in that little tirade. Shaggy could see he wasn't the only one at the table that had caught that. Ran and Vlad were smiling wickedly, and Slink looked smug as all hell. Levy chortled to herself at Shaggy's shoulder, and the noise seemed to rock Clevin out of his angry moment. The commander jumped to his feet, banging his armored legs against the table and waking his second guard. He held his large black helmet under his arm and nodded to all of them. "It seems the situation has gotten the better of me. I think it best that we depart and we continue these talks at a later date." Shaggy saw Slink smirk as the UGB troopers collected themselves and hurried around the table. "What about our spot on the council? Is that offer still on the table?" Clevin turned to Slink as he marched toward the door. The older man said nothing as he slowly put his helmet on and walked out. Shaggy sent a mental order for Seacrest and Stanley to watch the armored troopers leave. They both sent back acknowledgements, and he could feel them move to follow. Once done, he turned back to the room in time to see Dave glancing at everyone. "What was that about, dudes? I mean, I could almost taste that tension in the air." Shaggy snorted as Slink idly tapped at the table. Levy hummed in thought before she explained. "Clevin just let slip that the UGB are the watchmen of Undertown. Probably set up by the government of Austin, by the way he explained things. We always assumed that was the case. But so what? Does that change anything?" Ren asked. Slink shook his head slowly. "Not really. But now we know what happens if Undertown falls to shit. The city is ready and willing to wipe us all out if we get too rowdy. I can tell you right now, players aren't going to give a shit," Vlad said, taking a sip from his blood flask. "If they come down here, they are going to want a slice of the pie. No matter how they get it." "It seems they are already down here," Levy said. "So, what do we do?" All the heads in the room turned to Slink. The pale teen was chewing his lip and tapping the table. Obviously lost in thought, he jolted in his seat when he realized everyone was watching him. He looked confused for a few moments, before he sighed and groaned. "Why is this on me? Can't any of you adults handle this shit? I mean, we could. But we don't have your flair. Besides, your ideas are better most of the time. I just know any of my ideas will probably be shot down." Slink snorted as he rubbed the back of his neck. A pale green snake popped out from his shirt collar and licked Slink's cheek a few times. Slink patted the snake idly as he thought. Shaggy put his own mind to the issue. But really, to him, they could just hole up and bolster their defense. Let the other players wreck shit and freak and rack turf. It was nothing to them. "Okay." Slink sighed after thinking for a bit. "First step is verifying the information we've been getting from our spies. Efi said the Racks have been busy, but nothing about a mass exodus topside. We also need info on the freaks. Last we heard, their splintered forces had finally congealed under one leader. So any players fighting for freak turf are going against the whole freak gang?" Slink nodded. "Yep. But Ephemera herself said that all gangs out that way were small time. So I don't think it's a guild. Thank the gaming gods for that," Levy said, smiling. "But do we really need to do anything? I mean, it will probably stabilize itself. I mean, sure, one of the big gangs pulling away would create a vacuum. But gangs will show up to fill that space, right? So why get involved? We can just turtle up and weather the storm. So long as Undertown itself stays standing, I sure Topside will leave us alone." Shaggy nodded along, happy that his wife agreed with his own thoughts on the matter. But Slink's face scrunched up and he shook his head again. his mess of hair flopping everywhere as he stated. Sure, but what if whoever steps up doesn't want to listen to the rules? What if they take the territory and try to come at us? Sure, if we play defense we could probably fight them off. But that's a fight that can be avoided. So instead, why don't we pick an area and be kingmakers? Shaggy grinned. Well, at least I like the way that sounds. Is that what it sounds like, though? Dave nodded. Yeah. Kingmakers were, like, religious or political people with great influence. They would pick a person with a legitimate claim to the throne and back them. Once that person was on the throne, they held an unnatural amount of sway over what got passed in the kingdom. It's a truly gnarly position, dudes. Everyone blinked at Dave as he drummed out a tune on the wooden table. His previous words forgotten in favor of his new drum solo. Shaggy shook off the familiar feeling of confusion when it came to Dave and turned to Slink. So who do we back? I mean, I think I have an in with the Rex. No. Slink shook his head. It's got to be the freaks. The Rex are already too hierarchical. If we play around in that pool, someone will notice. But the freaks are way more loose in comparison. Vlad, think you can take some of your coven and scope us out a freak target? Vlad glanced at Shaggy and then back to Slink. The question clear on his face. Shaggy would have been the obvious choice to make overtures to the freaks. As a werewolf, he had kind of a leg up in that regard. Even with him taking out one of their crews topside. But Slink gave a small shake of his head and kept staring at the vampire. Vlad sighed. Yeah, I can do it. My children are getting a little restless. They've taken to sparring with Shaggy's damn mutts at all hours of the day. Shaggy grinned as he recalled a sparring session where Seacrass had taken 5 of Vlad's vampires. Vlad had the numbers for sure, but Shaggy's pack were powerhouses. Each and every one. Vlad stood and turned into a black mist. The mist seeped through the floor and dissipated as Slink turned to Ren. Can you get Randa and rolled on the new armor? They need more materials for it, but we already have the quests down for that. Afterward, look over our turf and see what needs shoring up. Ren nodded as he stroked his leathery gray chin. His rhino-like white horn bobbed as he spoke. I'm on defense? If you would, please. No problem, kid. Ren stood and stepped away from the table. His new short hammer nearly cracked the underside of the table. It jostled on its hip strap as Ren steadied the small heavy hammer and waved goodbye to them. Shaggy almost spoke up, but Dave beat him to it as he excitedly got in Slink's face. What about me, little dude? What you got for your old pal Dave? Slink smiled and raised his hands palms up. The teenage boy shrugged his shoulders and laughed. Huh. I got nothing for ya, Dave. You just being you is already a massive boon to everyone's morale. Why don't you help out where you can? We have another supply exchange with the Brute clan coming up. Maybe you could jump in on that. Sweet. Hanging with the big lizard dudes? Love it. I'm off, little dude. Hope the bad news you got for Shaggy goes well. Shaggy felt his head snap up as what Dave said registered. He immediately felt his hackles rise as he realized why he and Levy were left for last. The kid was going to say something they weren't going to like. He just knew it, and judging from the pensive look on Levy's face, she did too. Slink gave them both a chagrined look as he opened his mouth to say something. He quickly closed it again and rethought his words. Shaggy rubbed his eyes and growled. Just say it, Slink. We're both adults. What are we doing that we won't like? Slink winced. I need you to open your cavern to more of our people. Oh, come on. Levy shouted. That was supposed to be our little space. Then the teens came along and we had to accommodate them. Then we joined up with Undertown and you lot have been using it as a damn warehouse. We're even building housing for some of the damn lackeys, Slink. What more do you want? Levy had stood from the table and was wagging a finger down at the slim boy. He looked both embarrassed and annoyed as one of his snakes popped from his collar and hissed at Levy. Her finger glowed purple for a few seconds as she faced off against the small creature. But Slink quickly tried to defuse the situation. We are going to need a fallout shelter. If shit doesn't work out in Undertown, we are going to need a space to fall back to. Also, it's a space that the UGB and their masters don't know about. You don't have to house anyone there right now. But we need to get more people through so they can start building out a place for the whole Legion. Which means I need Levy to take off the restrictions she placed on the portal. Shaggy nodded as Slink rattled off the reason they need his and Levy's cave. It had already been a hell of a lucky find. When Levy had said she wanted to kept it just for themselves, Shaggy had agreed with her reason. Now, however, he also agreed with Slink. Sharing a look with his drow wife, Shaggy smiled as he saw her unable to argue with the young teen. Fine. Levy snapped, clearly still peeved. But I want them across the cave. Dig yourselves a little hole out that way. I'll even have some of the mages help excavate. Slink raised a hand and sighed. Thank you. But remember, this is just a precaution. We might not even need it. But it will be very good to have a fallback position. Agreed. Shaggy said, smiling and rising to his feet. He gave Levy a quick hug before they started walking out of the room. But Slink coughed awkwardly as they reached the door. Shaggy spun on his heel and stared at the young boy. Slink was playing with his sleeves as he stood at the table. He barely made eye contact with Shaggy as he asked. Also, Shaggy. I'm gonna need you to stay out of all this for a bit. What? Shaggy shouted, aggrieved. Look, dude, you're a great friend and a hell of a gamer. But you have history with both factions at play here. You've pissed off the freaks to no end, and the Racks are no different. To top it off, you've also killed lieutenants in both gangs. Don't get me wrong, that's ultimately great and it's helped us a lot. But if you get involved, I feel like you are going to make things worse. Dude, Shaggy tried to keep the hurt from his tone. I know. If we need someone to crater in and set the law down, it's you. But this is politics. We both know you want no part in that, right? So while we're handling shit in Undertown, why don't you go stir up shit topside? Shaggy grunted. You know, you make kicking me out of Undertown sound reasonable. No one's kicking you out, hun. Levy said as Slink nodded furiously. Yeah, if you want to stay and help. Go ahead. But it's going to be all back alley deals and stealth missions. Do you really want that? You're a wolf, Shaggy. You gotta run free. You've been thinking of that one for a while, haven't you? Shaggy rolled his eyes. Just since Clevin left. Shaggy snorted. Fine. But if this wolf is running, he's taking his pack. Shaggy glared at Slink, daring him to disagree. The pale teen looked annoyed, but finally he relented. Fine. But let Ephemera stay for a bit to get her replacement up to speed. She has a replacement? Levy and Shaggy asked together. Yeah, she's been working with her for a while. Apparently she's been worried you're going to take the pack out without her. So she's got a little protege. A Lunatian or Lunian? Something like that. She can go invisible too. Great. Shaggy said, clapping his hand together. Levy and I can focus on our side of the portal while you and the others play politics. Slink rolled his eyes as he wiped his sweaty hands on his pants. Shaggy grinned wolfishly at the kids as he wrapped an arm around his wife and strode out of the room. As he did, he sent a general call to all of his pack. It felt like a while since they all went out together, and Shaggy was already planning the mayhem he wanted to get up to. Levy placed a kiss on his temple and whispered in his ear. You have that creepy little smile again, dear. Shaggy snorted. It's not creepy. It's sinister. No, love. You look like you're about to start taking candy from children. Seriously, it's like a Saturday morning cartoon villain is about to ruin the main character's day. Bah. What kind of wife are you? Can't even see the evil within her own husband. This is a look of a master criminal, I tell you. It's really not. You look like. You okay? Levy asked as they portaled back to their cave. Shaggy nodded idly as he checked his link with his pack. I'm fine. The kid is kind of right. We want nothing to do with that nonsense. We both know I'm not geared toward the spy shit. I'm a werewolf. Levy glanced at him from the side of her eye, but stayed quiet as she turned back to the portal. A purple glow suffused her hands, and she raised them up at the large portal. Shaggy assumed she was making the changes that Slink had requested. Looking around, Shaggy sighed. Their quiet little underground cave was about to get a lot more crowded. He took in the 3 buildings they had built when it was just them, his pack, and the teens. The circle of trees was growing thick again, and more grass gave some color to the dreary cave. There was a storehouse built far behind their house, where they stored excess stuff for the Legion. Just beyond that was the eastern wall of the cavern, and Shaggy thought it would make a good place to build out. They could get the mages and lackeys on that while Shaggy and his pack went topside. The portal started to ripple as someone passed through it, and Shaggy grinned as he waited for his pack. But he frowned when a shock of red hair appeared. 14's face was down and she had her eyes closed as she went through the portal. By her side were Sensor and Cutie, with Mel bringing up the rear. Cutie and XIV were the only 2 with their eyes closed. Sensor looked a little sick, but Mel was strolling like nothing had fazed her. Portal travel is always a little stomach-turning. But Mel just smiled as she watched her friends collecting themselves. That wasn't that bad. Little stomach flippy, but I've had worse. Mel grinned as she pushed her light blue hair out of her face. What the hell are you talking about? That was worse than some theme park rides. Cutie complained, still unsteady on her feet. Shaggy groaned as he asked. What are y'all doing here? We came to help you out, boss man. XIV said, trying to smile. Shaggy rubbed his face and looked at Levy. But she was still waving her hands in the air. She gave him a smirk from over her shoulder but said nothing as Shaggy looked over 14's group. He was about to tell them to go back through when the portal rippled again. He waved them away from the portal as Seacross's massive green chest pushed through the portal, followed by the rest of him. Stanley came next. The tall lanky blonde was grinning happily as he trailed after his lizard friend. Tom stuck his head through first before he stepped through quickly. The short, dark-haired man scampered around to Shaggy's side and said nothing as Vic and Sybil came next. The tall cowboy had his rifle strung over his left shoulder and was talking animatedly with the shorter woman. Sybil was dressed in an odd mix of armors. Her chest piece was a silver metal piece, but her arms and legs were this odd black leather. Shaggy could make out purple runes on the leather, but he didn't know what they were. Rita came next, her heavily armored form passing through the portal and scanning everything. Her sword hung on her hip and Shaggy noticed that she had finally purchased a proper scabbard for the thing. Her armor was the same silver metal as Sybil's, but it had a light blue glow at the joints. Rita gave Shaggy a nod as she finished scanning for threats and moved to take her place on his left side. Shaggy was about to ask Rita about all the pack's new upgrades, but the portal rippled again and a black-haired, pale woman stepped through. Ephemera's short form stepped from the portal like she was taking a walk. Although Shaggy could see the telltale signs of sweat running down her face. His second-in-command had clearly run all the way to the bar when the call went out. Shaggy grinned as he thought about Slink's request to have Ephemera hand things over to her protégé. His pack picked up on his mirth as Ephemera snapped her gaze to him. I told Fiona that I was leaving. Ephemera complained as she adjusted her leather jacket. Slink and her can get the reports settled. Undertown is shifting, but it's nothing dangerous yet. In fact, this is the best time to transfer over the position. Don't give up your day job just yet. This is just a little side job to keep us rowdy wolves out of the shit. You can still keep your spymaster job if you want, Shaggy said as Ephemera moved to his right side. It was then that Shaggy realized his entire pack had moved to flank him. Stanley and Seacrass were at the far sides, while Sybil and Vic were the next step closer, followed by Rita and Ephemera. Tom had his back. The wiry man was even now looking behind them. Shaggy didn't know what threats his pack expected, but it made him smile all the same. Ephemera slapped his shoulder. "You're not getting rid of me, boss. Now that I'm number 2, I have to manage your pack." "You're number 3. Levy called from her spot near the portal. "Not among the werewolves. Wife trumps wolf, Effie." Having no response to that, Ephemera stuck her tongue out at Levy's back. Shaggy heard Levy snort as her magic seeped back into her hands. 14's party watched the entire scene until Mel had to get a question out. "Can you do that? Like, bite other players and turn them into werewolves?" "Don't know." The notification only mentioned what happened when biting the unwilling. But there would also be other issues. Like, how they fit in with the pack and how well they worked with all of us. Which is why I have a kind of marking system. It gives them some of the werewolf powers and it's the first step to joining. But I'd also need space in my pack. So you don't have space. Shaggy kept his face neutral as he glanced at his werewolf pack tab. Pack size, 7 out of 10. Nope. Shaggy lied as he glanced at a smiling Levy. "You done, babe? We got stuff to do and people to see." Levy grinned but said nothing as she walked over to him. They had agreed that she wouldn't be getting the bite. She had no interest in playing a werewolf and was more than happy with her magic. Of course, that meant Shaggy had to find 3 more people for his ranks. He had his pack out looking for candidates, but he wasn't sure about marking a player yet. Lackeys had loyalty scores after all. XIV coughed into the awkward change in conversation before asking. "So what are we doing, boss?" Shaggy sighed. "I've got some contacts topside I want to get in touch with. But this place also needs to get set up as quick as possible. We have a large construction project coming up and we need supplies and such." Turning, he addressed his pack. "Y'all know the game plan. Find it and buy it. If you can't buy it, steal it. If you can't steal it, find someone who can." His pack gave him feral grins, but they all stayed still. Shaggy blinked and waited for questions or comments. But when nothing came, he sent them all inquisitive thoughts. It was Ephemera who broke the silence first. "We have no problem with any of that, boss. But first, you know you have to show us, right?" Shaggy rolled his eyes. "I can't do it on command yet, Effie. You know that. Still. Why don't you try it, boss? It will give the pack some inspiration." Groaning, Shaggy brought up his stat sheet and gave it a look through. Lycanthrope mutation tree. Attack LVL 19. Canines LVL 2. Claws LVL 15. Demon claws LVL 17. Sharpness LVL 16. Serrated edge. Convex edge LVL 5. Burning edge LVL 3. Bone claws. Defense LVL 15. Tough bones LVL 5. Reinforced bones LVL 2. Enhanced evasion LVL 4. Utility LVL 18. Partial transformation LVL 13. Limb transformation LVL 4. Hybrid form LVL 1. Regeneration LVL 30. Limb regen LVL 3. Pain suppression LVL 5. Points, 0. General tree. Toughness LVL 32. Thick skin LVL 17. Skin resistances LVL 5. Skin durability LVL 6. Rawhide. Demon leather LVL 1. Dermal armor LVL 5. Shifting plates LVL 5. Defense LVL 2. Reflexes LVL 25. Quick hands LVL 15. Manual dexterity LVL 5. Shadowboxing LVL 5. Quick feet LVL 5. Slide move LVL 4. Mind LVL25. Enhanced focus LVL5. Perception manipulation LVL3. Mental defense LVL5. Psychic barrier LVL3. Points, 0. His hybrid form was still at level 1. That was despite him trying to dump loads of points into it. Thankfully, he didn't waste any points. But they also wouldn't go into the ability at all. Shaggy and Levy had brainstormed why, both in and out of the game. But their leading theory was that he unlocked the ability before his utility tree was the right level. So he couldn't raise it until utility was high enough. Which is why he had dumped a fair number of points from the cog raid into that portion of his tree. But he also made sure to spread the love around as much as possible. Of course, having the ability and using it were two entirely different things. Shaggy had done his level best to recreate the feelings he had when transformed. But reaching that state of total empty was a surprising challenge. Shaggy had never liked meditation or other such nonsense. So the idea of emptying his mind to the point of absolute clarity was a pain in the ass for him. Of course, Levy had her own ideas on his hybrid form too, but he didn't know if he agreed. "Why don't you try my idea then, love?" Levy said happily. "You keep trying to go all Zen monk on it, but I don't think that's the right tack." Shaggy groaned. "Yeah, but what does feed the inner wolf your emotions even mean? Like I said, you suck at clearing your mind. So I don't think that's what happened with Cog. I think you were so pissed that I died that your inner wolf woke up and got pissed, too. So when you two were in sync, and your emotions were at their highest, your inner wolf absorbed those emotions for you. Then it used those emotions to power the transformation." "What are they talking about?" "Shush, censor. Shaggy's about to try something." "Like what?" "I don't know, but I bet it'll be cool." Shaggy ignored the peanut gallery as he looked inward. He could feel the roiling mass of emotions and hunger that was his wolf. It no longer sat in a cage. Instead, within the landscape of his mind, the beast sat happily in an imaginary forest. Shaggy gave it a mental poke. "Hey!" Shaggy called mentally. "You eat emotions now? You want some annoyance? I got that in spades. How about some mild anger?" His inner wolf rolled over and ignored him. It yawned, its enormous mouth showing off its rows of shiny white teeth. Shaggy flicked one of the wolf's demon horns. "Hey, dingbat. Rise and shine. We gotta practice this shit, right?" The inner wolf cracked an eye and glared at him, but Shaggy just glared back until the giant wolf eventually got to his feet and huffed. Shaggy agreed, but practice made perfect, as they said. Focusing on his emotions at the moment, Shaggy took the mild annoyance he felt at having to perform for his pack and sent it toward the wolf. The enormous wolf's nose huffed angrily, and he batted at the emotion with his paws. Shaking its head, it glared at Shaggy. He gave the beast a mental shrug and tried to think of another emotion. But he wasn't really feeling anything at the moment. Shaggy opened his eyes and gave everyone a sorry look. "It's a no-go. I'm just not feeling it." Feelings of disappointed reverberated from his pack. But the same was heard from 14's group. They groaned and whined as they missed out on a show. Levy stepped closer to Shaggy and stared down at him. "What, specifically, did you try? Just so we know." "I just threw my current feelings at it." Shaggy shrugged. Levy rolled her eyes. "Of course that didn't work. You gotta try the same emotions you felt during the cog fight." "Yeah, but I don't feel any of that right now." "Of course not. But you still have the memory, right? So try to remember it and see how the beast likes that." Shaggy sighed, but he went along with the idea. Returning to the small grassy glade where the wolf lay, Shaggy wasn't surprised to see the big thing glaring at him. He gave it a mental shrug and tried to remember everything he was feeling when Cog killed Levy. No matter how many games they played, Shaggy didn't think he'd ever get used to seeing his wife die. It was the same for Levy, to hear her tell it. Something about being in full immersion made it even more real. Shaggy recalled watching Levy get stomped by Cog's massive armor. The look of shock on her face, the pain, and then her calm features as she got cubed. Next came Shaggy's own shock, his emotional turmoil, and then his rage. The wolf perked up at the feelings, and Shaggy tossed the memory into the black wolf's face. The giant wolf barked happily and snapped at the memory. Shaggy felt the feelings disappear, and he became eerily calm. The wolf was standing now, eager and hungry for more. Shaggy sent the same memory again, but it rang hollow even as the wolf snapped it up. So Shaggy searched his brain for more angry or emotional memories. Some were from games. Other instances where Levy or good friends had died suddenly. But then the memories flooded in from the real world. Being picked on at school, getting into fights, arguing with his parents and sister, leaving home, returning years later. Years upon years of short jokes. Shit, I might have a complex. Shaggy chuckled as he watched his inner wolf eat it all. As the wolf snapped up each memory, Shaggy realized that his feelings about each incident were mellowing. He was becoming almost serene as the wolf at his ate the raw emotions. That same clarity from the fight with Cog was hitting him again. As they did, his wolf was growing bigger and bigger. It was too late when Shaggy realized that the wolf was actively getting closer to him. With a sudden snap of its jaws, the wolf swallowed Shaggy whole. He threw himself back, trying to get away from his inner wolf. Shaggy blinked a few times as he noticed he had actually jumped backwards. Levy and the others were staring at him as he tried to collect himself. Shaggy raised his arms and hands to check his body, but when he did, he saw his arms were long and wolfish. He had burst from his t-shirt and his large hairy thighs were tearing at his jeans. His shoes had exploded, his feet now furry, black-clawed appendages. Holy shit, boss. XIV and Ephemera said at the same time. Shaggy merely nodded as he ran his lanky arms across his broad chest. He was taller than Seacrass and even broader across the shoulders. His muscles were tightly coiled and ready to spring at any moment. He spotted his long snout, but at least that was familiar by now. The legs were strange, but also something he could grow used to. As he was examining himself, his friends and pack drew closer. Shaggy was about to preen when he felt the transformation wear off. He tried to hold on to it, but the wolf wasn't responding. It was when he was shrinking back to size when he figured it out. The wolf had joined with him. That's why it wasn't in his mindscape anymore. They were literally one. He felt his wolfish passenger roll its eyes at him as it went back to its own little grove. Ah, Dogman is gone. Mel snarked, although she was still wide-eyed at Shaggy transformation. The others didn't pay her any mind though, as they rushed Shaggy. Effie and Levy rapidly asking questions. The rest of his pack also threw in the occasional query, but Shaggy couldn't answer any of them. He felt like he'd just gone 12 rounds at his parents' dojo. The thought brought back the unhappy images. But Shaggy immediately tossed it to the wolf and let the calm feelings wash over him. Levy, seeing that he was having an issue, ordered everyone around. Hey! Give him space, it's a new ability. He might not have a full handle on it. Back off. Immediately, Shaggy's pack formed a ring around him and moved a few steps away. He could still feel their curiosity. But he placated them with a few warm feelings. Levy moved closer and whispered in his ear. Are you all right? Shaggy grunted, but nodded. Yeah. Damn wolf is almost therapeutic. But I can't hold it for long. It's like I'm trying to fight a heavyweight when I am still in middleweight class. I just don't have the energy to maintain it. I think I got a pass during the Cog fight. But that was also over really quickly. Levy nodded. Good to know. But at least now you and your pack have something to fight toward. Right? Definitely. Shaggy grinned as he caught his breath and stood. They had gotten slightly off track with everything. But they still had plenty of time to get things underway. His pack turned to him as one, and Shaggy nodded happily. Okay, y'all got your show. You ready to work? He got a series of affirmations and joyous feelings. Behind his pack, XIV and her friends were also cheering along. Shaggy wasn't sure what they were going to do. But at least their cave had more players in it to run defense while he and his pack were out scouting the neighborhood and meeting his friends. First on Shaggy's list was an overeager alien arms dealer with a penchant for disintegration weapons.